Chapter 518. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? Ji-dong snorted coldly as he met the Fire Owl Lord's gaze. The Fire Owl Lord immediately felt as if his single eye was being pricked by needles as he subconsciously averted his gaze. He couldn't help but be secretly alarmed. In the Fire Raven King's eyes, although his great lord had returned, he still needed a place in the holy faith in order to truly lead the Fire Ravens to greatness. In the eyes of any creature from the core, the holy faith of the Flaming Bar was an unparalleled existence. The Fire Owl Lord represented the holy faith, so it naturally didn't dare offend him. It hurriedly flew in front of the Fire Owl Lord and quickly explained Ji-dong's origins. The Fire Owl Lord looked at the Fire Raven King skeptically after hearing his words. "You're saying that this person is a three-legged golden crow? What the hell do you know?" The three-legged golden crow disappeared not long ago, and the elders of the Holy Faith sent a demon smoke pufferfish to guard the entrance of Mount Elmans. How can you be sure that this is a three-legged golden crow? It's clearly a human in its current appearance. Even if it really is, it'll be severely punished by the elders for abandoning its post, not to mention that it might not be a three-legged golden crow. One of the Fire Owl Lord's 6 arms abruptly shot out as he spoke. The palm grew larger in the wind and grabbed the Fire Raven King's neck. With a sudden fling, it flung the Raven King far into the distance. A fierce light flickered in its single eye as it looked at Ji-dong once again. The two-armed fire owls that had come with it also had a great aura around them, exuding a fierce aura. The Raven King was flung 100 meters away before he finally steadied himself. His red eyes were immediately filled with rage. The Fire Ravens were known to be irritable and stubborn to begin with. As the king of the Fire Ravens, how could he endure being humiliated in such a manner? "Bastard, I'm also an elder of the Holy Faith. You're just an envoy. How dare you treat me like this?" The Raven King roared angrily as an incomparably shrill cry rang out from its mouth. The powerful sound waves spread out into the distance. The unity of the Fire Ravens was once again displayed in front of Ji-dong and the Heavenly STEM disciples. This time, they'd been personally summoned by the Fire Raven King. Tens of thousands of Fire Ravens quickly gathered together in the blink of an eye. The Fire Raven Lords and Fire Raven Commanders that lived on the rock walls all flew out and gathered around the Raven King. The number of Fire Crows was simply too large. In just a few breaths of time, they had already blotted out the sun. They were like dark clouds that dimmed the surroundings. Their flapping wings produced a constant buzzing sound in the air. Even Ji-dong couldn't help but be shocked by their powerful aura. He couldn't help but think of the following words: "When fire crows are enraged, millions will attack." Even if there weren't millions of fire crows, there were at least hundreds of thousands of them. Moreover, there were many commanders and lords among them. This situation was even more spectacular than what he had encountered in the first layer of the core world. "Fire Raven King, are you rebelling? I'm an envoy of the Holy Faith. Not to mention, do you think you can threaten me with these shrimp soldiers and crab generals?" As it spoke, the Fire Owl Lord waved its 6 arms at the same time. Circles of golden light continuously erupted from its body, and in the blink of an eye, it had already spread through the air. Just as Ji-dong had judged, it was already in existence equivalent to a Class 10 magical beast. This was clearly the extreme Yang fire. The Fire Owl Lord's expression also became grave as the intense flames of extreme Yang gradually took form. It raised its 6 arms at the same time, and an enormous golden ball of light gradually appeared above its head. Ji-dong curled his lips disdainfully. This Fire Owl Lord had likely just entered rank 10 not too long ago. Although the enormous golden ball of light it had conjured contained a considerable amount of extreme Yang flames, it hadn't actually reached the level of an elementary level ultimate killing technique. If it really did clash head-on with so many Fire Ravens, the Fire Raven tribe would suffer heavy losses, but the final loser would be the Fire Owl Lord. Even Ji-dong didn't dare say that he would be able to escape and scathe in the face of 1,000,000 Fire Ravens, much less a Fire Owl Lord that had just entered rank 10. The Fire Raven King roared angrily. "So what if you're an envoy? That's right, our Fire Crow clan isn't strong and is very weak, but we still have our own dignity. Although I'm one of the weakest elders in the Holy Church, I'm still an elder. You dare to attack me without any reason. Even if you report this to the core elders, I'm not afraid of you. Today, even if we have to perish together, I'll let you know that my Fire Crow clan is not to be trifled with. Jidong was very touched when he felt the violent undulations of the Fire Raven King's soul. This was the moral integrity that a tribe should have. A tribe wasn't afraid of being weak, but they were afraid of losing their moral integrity and backbone like the Fire Elves. Although the Fire Ravens were weak, they had an unyielding spirit. No matter how strong their enemy was, even if they had to pay the price of countless lives, they would never allow their dignity to be damaged. This was also why Jidong valued the Fire Ravens so much and had thought of ways to claim them as his own. Once they truly acknowledged him, a tribe like this would never betray him. Jidong didn't view them as magical creatures with such precious sentiments, but as an equal tribe with him, a tribe with a pure soul and an unyielding backbone. Jidong didn't attack immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes and temporarily cut off the spiritual connection between him and his companions. Then his powerful saint-rank soul soared into the sky like a large net and fell into the dark cloud of fire crows. In that instant, Jidong's soul seemed to grow eyes as it connected with the Fire Raven King first, followed by the stronger Fire Raven lords and commanders. The Fire Raven King was a Class 7 magical beast. The Fire Raven lords were around Class 5, and the commanders were Class 4. They were rare amongst the entire Fire Raven tribe, but that was only amongst the millions of Fire Ravens. There were over 1,000 Fire Ravens above the commander rank flying in the air right now. Jidong had to open up his soul to the fullest in order to envelop them all in his net and feel each of their presences. The Fire Ravens were of the same race, and their magical powers were of the same origin. Jidong had purposefully placed the Fire Raven King's soul in the core of his net and told it his instructions as soon as possible. The Raven King gave his full support to Jidong's orders without the slightest bit of hesitation. He sent his message to all the Fire Raven commanders and lords through Jidong's spiritual net. With such a terrifying soul as a guide, the magical power of the Fire Raven lords, commanders, and Fire Raven King exploded in an instant. Streaks of fiery red light shot out of their mouths. Only Fire Ravens above the commander rank could release energy from such a long-distance attack. The streaks of red light shot toward a single point in the sky as thousands of powerful magical ripples merged into one. The pressure in the sky that had already been created by the appearance of the millions of Fire Ravens became incomparably heavy, as if lava was about to drip down from the sky. Reddish-gold light flashed through Jidong's eyes, and in the next moment, a ray of almost tangible red light flashed through the magic condensed by the Fire Crow commanders, lords, and kings. With a soft hum, the Fire Owl Lord let out a strange cry, almost instantly leaving the spot it was hovering at. The golden ball of light that it had prepared above its head, the one that it believed would be able to inflict great damage on the Fire Crows, instantly vanished like melting snow. The solid light that descended from the sky also disappeared with a flash. Not only did it destroy the golden ball of light, it even left behind a deep black hole that was only a meter in diameter on the ground, its depths unknown. Although the red light had disappeared with a flash, the air around it had still warped violently from the terrifying heat. If it hadn't been for the Fire Owl Lord's quick reactions in cutting off the connection between himself and the magical power he'd released and dodging, he would have been dead by now. The Fire Owl Lord retreated far to the side with an ugly expression on his face. His two-armed clansmen's eyes rolled back in shock as they flew far away in a panic. They weren't the only ones who were shocked. The millions of Fire Ravens in the sky were also flabbergasted at the same time. Just how powerful had that energy ripple just been? It had completely exceeded the scope of their understanding. Only the Fire Raven King could barely understand that the attack just now had reached the level of a sure kill. That's right, a sure kill. The power that had fused together in that instant gave the fire ravens who'd been enveloped by Ji Dong's soul a vague sense of understanding. The trajectories of their magical power output were now clearly imprinted in their souls. When did our fire raven clan become so strong? This was the truest thought in every fire raven's heart. They never thought that they'd be able to release such a powerful attack one day. Not just ordinary fire ravens, even the Fire Owl Lord, an emissary of the Holy Faith, was undefeatable in the eyes of the Fire Raven King. Even if he could win, he'd likely have to pay the price of tens of thousands of his clansmen. However, the Fire Owl Lord had been scared off by that attack just now and had almost been completely destroyed by that terrifying attack. All of this was the power of the Fire Ravens, but the method of releasing it didn't belong to them. Although the souls of the Fire Ravens were far from being comparable to Ji Dong's, they could all sense where the powerful soul that gave them control came from under Ji Dong's deliberate control. Almighty Lord, it's you who've given us this power. 2 drops of red tears fell from the Fire Raven King's eyes and floated down from the sky. Once upon a time, the Fire Ravens had suffered countless oppressions, especially the Fire Raven King. He'd never had the right to speak during the elders' ceremonies and meetings, and had become the butt of jokes for the leaders of the other powerful races. They could only live in the first and second layers of the core, where the fire element was the thinnest. They were like the most hard-working workers, serving the other powerful races. The Fire Ravens weren't like the Fire Spirits. They had a strong sense of pride, and this situation had caused the Raven King to be in so much pain that he wished he were dead. But in that moment, their great lord had returned and changed everything. Furthermore, the great lord hadn't even personally made a move, but had only taught them how to defeat their enemies. The Fire Ravens felt their spines straighten up like never before as their eyes grew moist. Even though their tears were formed from the condensation of the fire element, at this moment, they could feel the existence of the future. Yes, they had a future, and this future came from a lord who floated below, taught them, and would definitely guide them. Emotions welled up in the minds of every Fire Raven King. Their gazes were all focused on Ji Dong, with the Fire Raven King at their head. Ji Dong had become an unparalleled existence in their hearts in this moment. To the Fire Ravens, Ji Dong's status was even greater than that of the Flaming Bar Holy Church. The wings on Ji Dong's back flapped lightly as he glided through the air, arriving 20 meters in front of the Fire Raven Lord. He didn't speak as his body flashed like lightning in the next moment, making a beeline for the Fire Raven Lord. The Fire Raven Lord had just recovered from its previous shock. It just couldn't understand how such a weak Fire Raven clan could deploy such power. That was clearly a power that could destroy it. Were they really that weak? The Fire Raven Lord was aghast at this moment. This was the first time it had felt fear since becoming an emissary of the Holy Church and breaking through to rank 10. Those fearless Fire Ravens and their terrifying attacks had left a deep impression on it. It was at this moment that Ji Dong's attack arrived. The golden red light that had been released from Ji Dong's body had been completely retracted by now, and he hadn't even released his sacred Fire King armor. He'd appeared in front of the Fire Raven Lord like a bolt of lightning, his right palm lightly swatting down towards the Fire Raven Lord's bald head. The Fire Raven Lord squawked as its top 2 arms raised to the sky, blocking Hyoheim's palm. The 4 arms below it clenched into fists and blasted towards Ji Dong's chest. This was the advantage of having more arms. Ji Dong didn't seem to see the 4 arms below it. His body had already risen into the air at the same time as the Fire Raven Lord's attack, maintaining a balanced position with the ground. The Fire Raven Lord's 4 arms naturally struck empty air. Chapter 519. The Fire Owl Lord discovered to his surprise that he couldn't lock onto the man the Raven King had called the 3-legged golden crow with his level of training. The Fire Owl Lord's hands collided with Ji Dong's descending palm amidst a deafening boom. The Fire Owl Lord's body fell from the sky like a cannonball, its arms exploding into countless pieces of flesh and blood. It had only lost its hands because it had reacted quickly enough and hadn't allowed the power of the deicide strike to fully enter its body. Jidong's body had also floated up slightly from the impact of the Fire Owl Lord's palms, but only slightly. On the other hand, the Fire Owl Lord's body fell from the sky like a cannonball. No matter how hard it flapped its wings, it couldn't stop its descent. It landed on the ground with a deafening boom, its legs sinking to the knees. The Fire Owl Lord had been completely at a disadvantage in this exchange. Jidong's magical power was only rank 82, but the Fire Owl Lord's magical power was equivalent to rank 90. Jidong had only used the ultimate Yang Fire in his attack just now, and the Fire Owl Lord magical power was also the ultimate Yang Fire. So why had it suffered such a great loss? Jidong's magical power was clearly inferior to its. The answer was simple. It was because of strength, physical strength. That's right, Jidong's magical power was inferior to the Fire Owl Lord's, but his body was far superior to the Fire Owl Lord's. He'd completely made up for his lack of magical power with his physical strength alone. Add to that the powerful compression of the deicide strike. How would the Fire Owl Lord be able to withstand this blow? It was the power of the deicide strike that had blasted the Fire Owl Lord's arms apart, and what had pounded it in the ground was Jidong's unparalleled strength, even more terrifying than that of ordinary dragons, the strength of the primordial dragon. The ancestor of the Earth Dragons had used its own blood essence to soak Jidong's body, and Jidong's bloodline now contained its own blood. Jidong had not endured that pain for nothing. After that, his body had truly evolved. That's right, it had evolved. In terms of physical strength, among all the heavenly stem saints, only Ajin, who also had the bloodline of the primordial dragon, could compare to him. However, in terms of physical strength, Jidong had already reached an extremely terrifying realm. Previously, when he faced the fire giant, he'd completely met force with force and even allowed the Fire Owl Lord to attack him, just to test how strong his body had become. Reality had proven that the fire giant's attack was no more than an itch to him. Even if the Fire Owl Lord in front of him directly attacked his body, it wouldn't be able to cause him any harm. This was the saint-level physique, a physique that even Qin Sixuan was shocked by. Of course, Jidong had no intention of letting the Fire Owl Lord go just like that. His body only paused in the air for a moment before he charged straight at the Fire Owl Lord. He was becoming more and more aware of the rules of the core world. This was a world where the strong preyed on the weak. If one wanted to have the right to speak, if one wanted to gain the respect of others, then one had to display strength that was completely above others. First, one had to use strength to conquer the opponent, then talk. This was definitely much more effective. This had already been proven by the fire giant. The Fire Owl Lord, who had crashed into the ground earlier, was still in pain from the violent tremors when Jidong descended from the sky and chased after it. In its panic, it also used its exclusive skill. In order to save its life, it no longer cared about holding back. A red light flashed in its single eye, and an intense purplish-black light shot straight at Jidong. When this light shot out from its single eye, Jidong was shocked to find that the Fire Owl Lord had actually temporarily locked onto him. What kind of light is this? Jidong hesitated for a moment before he raised his left hand and pressed down. At the same time, he stopped his descent and blocked that light. There was already a piece of pitch-black ice in Jidong's palm. It was his ultimate skill, nether flame ice. As the purplish-black light landed on Jidong's left palm, it was immediately frozen, and Jidong's body also froze in the air for a moment. He only felt a needle-like aura suddenly burrowing into his body from his palm. Moreover, this needle-like mana also had a kind of tyrannical destructiveness, as well as a strong toxicity. If it was someone else who encountered such an attack, their meridians would wither wherever the energy of the needle-like mana passed through, and once that power entered their internal organs, they would definitely die. What a vicious, exclusive skill. A cold glint flashed in Jidong's eyes. That needle-like mana had just burrowed into his palm when it was strangled by the ultimate dual fire mana. How could the physique of an ancestor dragon be invaded by ordinary external forces? Even this kind of mana that was solidified by jealousy could not do it. After being soaked in the essence and blood of the Earth Dragon ancestor, Jidong's body was already immune to all poisons, and this bit of poison was nothing at all. Under the strangulation of the ultimate dual fire, the remaining mana immediately disappeared. Of course, the nether flame ice itself also froze a part of the attacking mana. Although the exclusive skill of the Fire Owl Overlord could not cause substantial damage to Jidong, it did buy it enough time to escape. The remaining 4 arms slapped the ground at the same time, and with the help of the rebound, its body flew diagonally towards the entrance of the passage to the 3rd floor. At the same time, it passed by its 2 clansmen, stretched out its hands, grabbed them, and threw them in the direction of Jidong at the same time. Mana was injected into the bodies of these 2 clansmen. As long as their bodies came into contact with Jidong's attack, they would immediately self-destruct. Although it was not enough to hurt Jidong, in the opinion of the Fire Owl Overlord, it was definitely not a problem to stop Jidong for a period of time. Unfortunately, this Fire Owl Overlord had still underestimated Jidong. Seeing that the 2 fire owls had flown in front of him, Jidong's spiritual power had completely enveloped their bodies, and he was naturally very clear about their current situation. He stretched out his hands at the same time and grabbed the 2 panicked fire owls. At the same time, the Yang fire assimilation array had already risen behind Jidong. Jidong firmly grasped the arms of the 2 fire owls, but the explosion that the Fire Owl Overlord had anticipated didn't occur. The tyrannical power that it had injected into the 2 fire owls was instantly dispelled by Jidong's formation of assimilation. Who could compare to Jidong in terms of control of fire magic? Jidong flung out his hands and sent the 2 fire owls flying towards the ground. The Fire Owl Overlord had made use of the buffer created by its 2 brethren to run to the entrance to the 3rd level. Jidong was still 100 meters away from it. In its eyes, no matter how strong Jidong was, he wouldn't be able to stop it from entering the passageway to the 3rd level. As long as it could burrow into the passageway, the other wouldn't be able to find it again. The reason why the Fire Owl Overlord had been so eager to escape was because it had sensed a strong killing intent from Jidong. It could also clearly sense that the 3-legged golden crow that the Raven King had spoken of was something that it absolutely couldn't contend against. The pressure on its soul in particular had scared it out of its wits, and it couldn't even muster up the thought of fighting with all its might. However, just as the Fire Owl Overlord had heaved a sigh of relief and thought that it could escape, its rapidly flying body suddenly crashed into an invisible barrier with a thump without any warning. The Fire Owl Overlord's head was spinning from the impact, and it almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It had clearly felt that the invisible wall had disappeared after blocking it for a moment, but the violent recoil from the collision had still caused its forward speed to disappear completely, and it had even paused for a moment. It was the invisible and shadowless wall of destruction. A moment of pause was sometimes an eternity. The fire ravens in the sky only saw a bolt of golden lightning streak across the horizon, and the Fire Owl Overlord's body was sent flying backwards. It was only when it recovered from its dizziness and struggled with all its might that it stopped flying backwards. However, a large hand had already grabbed its neck in the next moment, like an eagle grabbing a chick. The Fire Owl Overlord, already scared out of its wits, couldn't put up any resistance at all. It had lost all power to resist, just like when it had grabbed the Raven King's neck earlier and was lifted into the air by the neck by Jidong's right hand. The battle had ended at this point. From the moment Jidong had launched his attack to the end, only a matter of a few breaths had passed. However, it was an incomparably shocking scene in the eyes of the fire ravens. Such a powerful Fire Owl Overlord hadn't even had the slightest ability to resist in front of Jidong, and had even disregarded the lives of its kin. However, it hadn't been able to escape Jidong's grasp in the end. Jidong's spirit spread out as he transmitted his message into the air, allowing every fire raven in the sky to feel it. The Fire Owl Overlord has attacked the Raven King of my kin without permission. Although he's an emissary of the Holy Faith, he's still guilty of offending his superiors and deserves death. The dignity of the fire ravens cannot be insulted by any outsider, and all of you are witnesses. From this moment on, I will not allow anyone to offend the dignity of my race. A blinding golden red light was instantly released, bringing with it the aura of a three-legged golden crow. It made Ji-dong look like a golden red sun as he floated in the air. The fire owl overlord in Ji-dong's hands didn't even have the chance to cry out before it turned into a ball of golden flames and dissipated into the air. A fist-sized 10th level fire crystal core was the only thing that remained, and it landed in Ji-dong's left hand. The Raven King cawed violently, his excited cries and the scene that had just taken place in front of them shaking the hearts of every fire raven. Under the Raven King's lead, the Fire Raven Lord, the Fire Raven Commander, and 1,000,000 fire ravens descended from the sky and floated to the ground. Every fire raven immediately prostrated themselves on the ground, spreading their wings and pressing their heads to the ground. The most reverent aura emanated from their souls, as if 1,000,000 fire ravens were worshipping them. Ji-dong slowly descended from the sky and floated to the ground. He looked silently at the Raven King in front of him and felt the waves of reverence from the millions of fire ravens. His heart couldn't help but change in that moment. Great Lord, please lead us and make our race even stronger. The Raven King said emotionally to Hyoheim. Ji-dong nodded slowly and said faintly, "Let the clansmen do their own things." Yes. The Raven King rose with extreme respect. Ji-dong's own strength and the strength of his soul that could lead the fire ravens to become stronger had completely won over the Raven King. Although the Raven King's soul wasn't strong, he could clearly feel Ji-dong's goodwill towards the fire ravens. It didn't matter to him whether or not Ji-dong was a true three-legged golden crow. What was important was that Ji-dong could lead the fire ravens to become stronger. That was enough. The Raven King dismissed his clansmen and only left the Fire Raven Lords and Fire Raven Commanders behind. The experts of the Fire Ravens had already surrounded the two Fire Owls and arrived in front of Ji-dong without needing his orders. Normally, if these Fire Owls came to a place like the second floor, they would absolutely look down on the Fire Ravens. Although their own strength couldn't compare to the Lord of the Fire Owls, they weren't inferior to the Fire Raven King. But now, they were like frosted eggplants as they lowered their heads, bewilderment flickering in their single eyes. What was being released from their souls was fear. Ji-dong's soul directly invaded the two Fire Owls' souls and forcefully communicated with them. You saw what happened just now very clearly. If it wasn't for me, you should know what would have happened to you. The two Fire Owls raised their heads and looked at each other before looking at Hyoheim again. Ji-dong could clearly see a look of hatred in their single eyes. This hatred was obviously directed at the Fire Owl Lord from before. They both understood that Ji-dong was speaking the truth. If it hadn't been for Ji-dong's actions just now, they would have been turned to dust by now. Not even their corpses would remain. The two Fire Owls nodded at Hyoheim at the same time. Ji-dong said, "Since this is the case, tell me why you've come this time and everything that happened just now. I believe that you should know how to reply to the Holy Faith when you return." The Fire Owl on the left said, "Esteemed three-legged golden crow, we know how to reply to our superiors. What happened just now was completely instigated by our Lord. He offended the Raven King and incurred the wrath of the masses. He was killed by the three-legged golden crow. We will definitely report this to our superiors." Ji-dong nodded in satisfaction and waved his right hand. Two balls of red light flew in front of the two Fire Owls. The two Fire Owls reflexively took them and were overjoyed when they looked closely. What had landed in their hands was a level 8 magical beast core. Chapter 520. It's just a small gift. It could be considered as helping the two of you calm down. If used properly, I believe they'll be able to help the two of you grow a pair of arms. I hope the two of you can become friends of my Fire Crow clan in the future. Ji-dong was obviously bribing them outright. The Fire Owls were much smarter than the Fire Ravens, and the two Fire Owls immediately nodded in agreement without much hesitation. They could all see how strong Ji-dong was. Even existence like the Fire Owl Lord had been destroyed in a few exchanges, and he had indeed saved their lives before. They naturally understood what Ji-dong meant. Having such a strong friend was better than having such a strong enemy. Not to mention, they'd seen the eruption of the fire ravens under the command of Ji-dong's soul. They could vaguely sense that the fire ravens would likely become different from before. Many thanks to Sire Three-Legged Golden Crow for his generous gift. The two fire owls said in unison. Ji-dong smiled faintly and said, "It's not a generous gift. Please return to the headquarters as soon as possible and ask the Holy Church to send a new emissary. From now on, I am the ruler of the fire ravens. I will take over as the elder of the fire ravens." "Yes, we understand." The two fire owls responded and spread the bare wings on their backs, flying into the passageway to the third floor. "Almighty Lord, are we really going to let them go just like that? We killed the emissary after all. The Holy Church can't blame us if they disappear together. After all, we've always been so weak in the eyes of the Holy Church. No one will suspect us." The Fire Raven King said a bit urgently to Hyoheim. A trace of a smile appeared on Ji-dong's face when he heard the Fire Raven King's words. The Fire Raven King was simple-minded, and his words weren't pretentious at all. He'd said that they'd killed the emissary, not that Ji-dong had killed the emissary alone. Ji-dong's impression of the Raven King was greatly improved from this simple sentence. He shook his head. "Your vision is too short-sighted. Do you think that's the end of the matter, with just killing people to keep their mouths shut? If the Holy Church really wants to investigate, they'll naturally know what's going on. One day, they'll reveal a flaw. I believe that these two flame owls won't dare to speak carelessly when they return. Otherwise, they'll have to endure my wrath. I've left a strand of my soul in each of their bodies, and they know that. If they make a decision that's disadvantageous to the fire ravens, then no matter where they flee to in the core world, I'll be able to find them and tear them into pieces." The Raven King started momentarily. He'd never thought that something like this could be done. A few traces of admiration appeared in his eyes as he said, "Great Lord, your servant will listen to your every command in the future." Ji-dong said, "Then why did the Fire Owl Overlord come to find you this time? What celebration is the Holy Church holding?" The Raven King's expression became a bit odd when he heard Ji-dong's question. He didn't say the specifics, but I've heard that something has happened to the great flaming bar head of our Holy Church. We haven't seen him in a long time, and this celebration is likely related to the election of a new head. Our core world has enjoyed unprecedented peace since the founding of the Holy Church. Although there have been occasional conflicts between the various races, we've been able to coexist peacefully. Every race is very satisfied with the current situation. All of this was bestowed upon us by the great flaming bar god. Now that the great flaming bar god has disappeared, we can't be without a head. Otherwise, the Holy Church will fall into chaos before long. Therefore, the 3 venerated elders and the 36 core elders have decided to hold this celebration in order to elect a new head to preside over the Holy Church and make all final decisions before the great flaming bar god returns. A strong sense of sorrow rose in Ji-dong's heart when he heard the flaming bar mentioned. "Flaming bar? Oh, flaming bar. So you've done so much for the core world. Raven King, who could participate in the selection?" Ji-dong stared at the Raven King with a burning gaze as he asked. The Raven King said, "Theoretically speaking, the selection should be made from the 3 venerated elders, the 36 core elders, and the 200 or so ordinary elders. The position of acting head should belong to one of the 3 venerated elders." Ji-dong's heart began to burn with an unprecedented fervor when he heard the Raven King's explanation. Then did the Flaming Owl Overlord bring any proof to participate in this celebration? The Raven King nodded. "He did bring proof, but he didn't give it to me." Ji-dong was stunned for a moment before he asked, "Why?" The Raven King said with righteous indignation, "The Flaming Owl Overlord said that I was too weak and that it would be a waste of time to participate in the celebration. He wouldn't give me the medallion and said that he wanted to take my Elder Medallion for him to experience. This is also why I said that you would represent the Fire Raven tribe in this celebration when I saw you. It was to retrieve the medallion from him. Even if I'm weak, I'm still one of the elders. Why should I let him go? Now that you've returned, you should be the one to observe the ceremony. However, the medallion should no longer exist now. It's likely been burnt to nothingness under your intense flames just now. Jidong's brow furrowed deeply. Then what do we do now? Are we unable to participate in this celebration? The Raven King smiled wryly. If the two flaming owls had reported back as you've said, they would have sent a new envoy and given us the medallion. Otherwise, I'm afraid we won't be able to participate in this celebration. Jidong said exasperately. Why didn't you say so earlier? He wouldn't have let the two flaming owls leave if he'd known earlier. The Raven King looked pitifully at Jidong. You didn't ask me. Wait. A thought flashed through Jidong's mind. You said just now that the flaming owl overlord wanted to take your medallion for himself to participate in the celebration. What's going on? You're an elder and it's not. Can it be that it's fine just because it has the medallion? The Raven King sighed and nodded. Yes, the Holy Faith will send out a certain number of medallions every celebration to us elders in order to ensure that the medallions are distributed. However, only the medallion is recognized when we participate in the celebration. Even humans who enter the core of the world can participate in the celebration as long as they have the medallion. Every level's checkpoint has to let them through. Therefore, medallion robberies happen every time. However, this is the first time that an envoy of the Holy Faith has forcefully taken our medallion. It's because we fire ravens are too weak and they know that we don't have the ability to complain. The Raven King grew angrier and angrier as he spoke, but he suddenly discovered to his surprise that the great lord of their tribe was smiling, and a bit sinister at that. Great lord, what are you smiling about? The Raven King probed. Jidong smiled faintly. If that's the case, then it'll be easy. How long until the celebration begins? The Raven King said, 3 months from now. It'll take at least a month's journey from here to the 15th level. Jidong nodded. Then it'll be easy. We don't need to wait for the Holy Faith to send new envoys. Since the medallions have already been sent out, we can just go snatch a few back. If you want to go, you can go too. We're going to go snatch someone else's? The Raven King stared at Jidong, dumbfounded. He'd never thought of something like this. His medallion, as well as that of the king of the Fire Spirit tribe, were always destined to be snatched away at every celebration like this. When had it ever been their turn to snatch someone else's? Jidong snorted coldly. Since they can snatch ours, why can't we snatch theirs? The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon had already landed on Jidong's back at this time. Without Jidong's support, the Heavenly Stem Disciples' 5 elemental yin-yang world had already been released. The group of Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples jumped off the back of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon one after another. Without the protection of the 5 elements yin-yang world, they had truly come into contact with the environment here. The surrounding temperature and the rich fire element in the air made everyone uncomfortable, especially the water element Du Ming and Lon Bauer, who were water element, and the metal element Du Exiner, who were metal element. Although Ajin was also metal element, it had the strong body of the dragon race and the powerful strength of level 89, so it was not very obvious. When Jidong dealt with the fire owl overlord, he used his soul to communicate with his companions again. He had to let them know what had happened. Fury laughed. Little junior brother, it seems like we can go straight to the 15th floor and participate in the celebration of the saint. Since the Saint of the Flaming Bar was founded by the Flaming Bar, you have to be the acting leader. Later on, let's all get a token. When the time comes, we can all participate in the selection of the acting leader. We can also help you share some of the pressure. It can also be considered as training. Jidong nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. However, there's still some time before the celebration begins. Let's wait for a month. If the Holy Church doesn't send a new emissary within a month, then we'll have to wait for a month. We'll snatch the tokens right away and head to the Flaming Bar's headquarters. If they send us the tokens, we'll snatch them too, but we'll have to do it later. Fury was taken aback for a moment before he said, A month later? Then what are we going to do in the next month? Stay here? There won't be enough pressure in combat. Even with the help of your 5 elements engendering and 5 elements yin-yang boundary, it won't be very effective for everyone. Jidong chuckled. Who says there won't be enough pressure in combat here? We're not the only ones who need to train in combat. My people need it too. Chen Sichuan couldn't help but burst into laughter. You really want to be the Fire Raven King here? Only you can think of that. In her eyes, her Ji Dong was so noble that he couldn't be equated with the Fire Ravens. Ji Dong said seriously, don't look down on the Fire Ravens. Not only do they have the advantage in numbers, but they also have a unity that humans can't compare to. Unity is enough to make them one of the strongest races in the core world. Their backbone, an unyielding backbone, make me proud. Becoming the Fire Raven King is the true reason why I did all that just now. You've all seen the Fire Ravens' combined attack just now. How many of you have the confidence to completely block it? You can become their touchstone and train them in teamwork, and they will definitely be able to bring enough pressure to everyone. If you underestimate the power of millions of fire crows, you will soon suffer a great loss in actual combat. Everyone nodded slightly after hearing Ji Dong's explanation. They'd all seen very clearly how the Fire Raven King and the other Fire Ravens had combined their strength. The combined strength of the Fire Ravens was absolutely quite domineering. Don't forget that this was a world full of the fire element. It was much easier for the Fire Ravens to replenish themselves than the Heavenly Stem disciples. Ji Dong smiled faintly. I'm one of the Fire Ravens from now on. You must work hard to deal with each other, one at a time. Oh, and don't hurt my people. The Fire Ravens hold grudges. Sparring with a flock of Fire Ravens was a very refreshing experience for the Heavenly Stem disciples. They naturally trusted Ji Dong's judgment unconditionally. Since Ji Dong said that the Fire Ravens would be enough to help them train, then they would definitely be able to. Ji Dong turned around and looked at the bewildered Raven King, who couldn't understand what they were saying. He flicked his wrist and brought the level 10 core he'd just obtained from the Fire Owl Lord to the Raven King. It's yours now. Remember to absorb it slowly and eat it bit by bit. If you eat it all at once, your body will explode and you'll die. No one will look down on you again when you're able to absorb it all. With the Raven King's current strength, it was very likely that he'd be able to directly ascend to level 9 if he could absorb all of the magical power within the core. Of course, this would take some time. Just like Ji Dong had said, he couldn't just eat it all at once. The Raven King's eyes were filled with excitement as he caught the core that Ji Dong had tossed over with his beak. These creatures of the core wouldn't turn down anything and flew back to their own caves with great care. After putting away the treasure, the Raven King appeared in front of Ji Dong again with an expression of unwillingness to die 1,000 times. Ji Dong's gaze when he looked at his companions was one of malice. Apart from the heavenly secrets, all of the Heavenly Stem disciples felt a chill run down their spines as a sense of foreboding rose in their hearts. Reality proved that the Heavenly Stem disciples' premonitions were completely correct. In the following month, Ji Dong had the Raven King gather all the Fire Ravens above the level of commander here. Chapter 521. There were close to 4,000 clansmen of this level in the entire Fire Raven tribe. Most of them had gathered near the Raven King's residence, and Ji Dong had divided them into 4 equal groups of around 1,000 clansmen each, taking turns to train. The message that Ji Dong had given them was very simple. Do as I say. When you're done training, go back and teach your clansmen. Although these Fire Ravens couldn't connect the souls of thousands of Fire Ravens at once like Ji Dong, they were able to communicate with each other through language. Although the results would be a bit weaker, it was absolutely doable. The Heavenly Stem Saints' bitter days had arrived after they'd been divided into groups. In terms of overall strength, the cultivation of 1,000 Fire Ravens was between Class 4 and Class 5 magical beasts. In other words, they were at the level of triple or quadruple crown demon masters. Compared to a powerful army like the Dongmu Empire's Annihilation Army, there was still a certain gap. After all, be it the Annihilation Army or the Diamond Army, they were all people who were one with the dragon, a powerful force formed by the fusion of the power of man and dragon. However, the Fire Ravens could only rely on themselves, and they only had a single attribute. In terms of overall strength, they were not as strong as experts like the Annihilation Army or the Diamond Army. However, it must not be forgotten that they had a commander that the trump card armies of the various empires did not have. They had a commander who was extremely familiar with the fighting style of the Heavenly Stem Saints. The existence of this commander could almost perfectly display the strength of the Fire Ravens. In this way, they would only face one Heavenly Stem Saint every time. The days of suffering for the Heavenly Stem Saints had arrived. This kind of cultivation method was not only very beneficial to the other Heavenly Stem holy disciples, it was also a kind of training for Jidong himself. What he was training was precisely his soul power that had already reached the saint level. The Heavenly Stem holy disciples had also asked Jidong, "Your soul power has already reached this level. Do you still need to cultivate?" Jidong's answer was simple. Of all his abilities, the one closest to dark divination was his strength of the soul. Since his other abilities couldn't compare to dark divinations in this period of time, then he had to catch up to his saint-level strength of the soul, or even surpass it. Once he succeeded, then he would have the ability to restrict dark divination in at least one aspect. Moreover, training the strength of the soul was something that could only be discovered by chance. How could Jidong be willing to give up once he encountered it? 10 days later. "Senior, it's your turn." Jidong stood quietly on a small hill. The temperature of the core world didn't affect him at all. After 10 days, his strength of the soul remained in a highly tense state. Although it was only 10 days, Jidong clearly felt that his ability to control his soul had increased. Although he couldn't be sure if this method could improve his strength of the soul systematically, at least this was the only method that could bring about positive changes in his strength of the soul. He constantly used his strength of the soul to control the outside world, exhausting his tremendous strength of the soul as much as possible. Jidong was controlling over 1,000 fire crows, and he tried his best to accurately control each and every fire crow. In the beginning, Jidong could only focus this precision on around 100 fire crows, and he could only generally control the other fire crows. He couldn't control them perfectly. But now, after 10 days, Jidong's grasp of these fine control methods was getting better and better, and he could already control 300 fire crows to attack with precision. That wasn't all. While he was controlling the 300 fire crows, his ability to control the other fire crows also increased. As a result, the pressure that the Heavenly Stem Saints had to face kept increasing every day. Jidong's improvement in the control of his soul clearly surpassed the Heavenly Stem Saints. He was familiar with the adaptability of the fire crows, as well as the speed at which his mana increased. This training could be said to be extremely painful. Jidong was too familiar with the limits of his companion's endurance. Therefore, he would never hold back. He would not stop until he had squeezed out every last bit of his companion's strength and exhausted every bit of their strength. "Little junior brother, can you let me rest for a while longer?" Fury looked at Jidong on the hill in the distance with a pained expression. Fighting with these fire crows was simply too painful. He had to be careful not to kill these fire crows, and even if there weren't such restrictions, he might not have been able to do so. It wasn't easy to kill these fire crows. Jidong's control was becoming stronger and stronger, and these fire crows were like his mana. Add to that the perfect detection of his sacred rank soul, he was able to accurately find the flaws in the Heavenly Stem Saints' demonic techniques every time he released his mana. No matter how strong the Heavenly Stem Saints were, their individual mana couldn't compare to thousands of fire crows that were at least at the 4th level. Furthermore, there were 5th-level fire crows among them, and the Fire Crow King, whose level of cultivation was increasing by leaps and bounds every day. The fire crows were divided into 4 groups, and there were 9 other Heavenly Stem Saints apart from Jidong. Logically speaking, they should be able to deal with them, but in reality, under Jidong's control, just one group of fire crows was enough to torture the Heavenly Stem Saints to the point that they wished they were dead, and they couldn't even complain. Under Jidong's perfect control, the damage output was simply perfect. At most, it would cause them some pain and not truly harm them. Of course, when Jidong controlled the fire crows to attack, he had also fully considered the defensive effects of the holy flame armor that the Heavenly Stem Saints wore, as well as the offensive and defensive abilities that they were proficient in. He was absolutely fair. and even Qin Sichuan wouldn't go easy on her. Every single one of the Heavenly Stem saints understood that there was only one way to defeat these fire crows, and that was to kill Jidong first. At the very least, they had to make him lose control of these fire crows. But how could this be so easy? Up until now, not a single one of them had attempted to do so. This was akin to moths flying into a flame. At least, Jidong was only controlling the fire crows and hadn't participated in the battle yet. If they were to send themselves to his doorstep, they would likely still be beaten up even if they trained for 100 years. They could only seek joy amidst the pain and see who could last longer under the attacks of the fire crows. Fury walked up helplessly and shook his head as he looked at Jidong. Jidong smiled faintly. "Senior brother, your mana and stamina have more or less recovered. You're completely capable of enduring the next round of trials. I have to support the fire crows against the 9 of you. I haven't even said that I'm tired yet." Fury's originally lazy eyes suddenly lit up. He raised his head to look at the 1,000 fire crows that had already lined up in the sky, and shouted, "Bring it on." Fury, who was wearing armor, looked extremely majestic as he stood there. His entire body was like an iron tower, and a glaring bluish-purple light suddenly erupted from his body, making him look like a huge electric ball. At the same time, the Hell Thunder Divine Axe had already appeared in his right hand. It was about 3 meters long, which was the most suitable form for group battles. Without holding back, Fury released all his mana. Without looking at the fire crows in the sky, he raised the Hell Thunder Divine Axe in his hand and swung it in Jidong's direction. Fury understood Jidong very well. From the previous trials, although the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples were improving, the speed of the fire crow's improvement and Jidong's control were also improving. One person's improvement could not be compared to the improvement of a flock of fire crows. Hence, he understood that if he wanted to continue the trials, unless someone could break through to the 9th crown, they would still not be able to contend against these fire crows. Hence, he was very clear that if he wanted to last a little longer, he would first have to disrupt Jidong's control. Without Jidong's control, these fire crows would become toothless tigers, and Fury would not care about them at all. The lightning was extremely fast, and the ear-piercing sound caused the air around Fury to explode. The huge pressure from the flock of fire crows in the sky was also reduced, and a bluish-purple arc of lightning was about to reach Jidong in the blink of an eye. Jidong's attention had been focused on Fury since the start of the trial. Although he was rather surprised that his senior brother had attacked him, he did not panic at all. He raised his hand slightly, and the bluish-purple arc of lightning from the god artifact stopped in mid-air, just like that. The first reaction of an energy like lightning when it encountered an obstacle was to explode. Even the lightning produced by a god artifact was the same. The purplish-blue lightning instantly exploded when it encountered an invisible obstacle, turning into thousands of tiny bolts of lightning that scattered in all directions. However, not a single one of them landed on Jidong. Fury was taken aback. Although he knew very well that his attack couldn't hurt Jidong, he didn't think that Jidong would be able to block it so easily. With just a slight lift of his hand, Fury's attack was dissolved into nothingness, and he didn't even feel the slightest bit of shock. It was as if a barrier had appeared out of thin air, helping Jidong block the attack. What was going on? Junior brother's strength had actually reached such a level. No wonder he had been able to kill the Hua, Shao commander that was clearly a Class 10 magical beast so easily. Jidong had never truly displayed his god-slaying wall in front of his companions, so Fury naturally did not know of its existence. The most powerful aspect of the god-slaying wall was that once it was released, it would no longer have anything to do with Jidong. It would stop in its fixed position for a short period of time, which was why Fury could not feel the feedback of his attack, nor could he sense any changes in Jidong due to the collision. The god-slaying wall required the support of a powerful soul in order to be used well. Without a doubt, Jidong had this ability. Fury's surprise caused him to pause for a moment, but Jidong's control over the fire ravens was not affected at all. The thousands of fire ravens spat out magical energy at the same time, and 700 beams of light condensed into an intense orange-red flame under the Raven King's lead, descending upon Fury's head in an instant. With Ji-Dong's control and the presence of a saint-level soul, Fury had no other choice. All he could do was face it head-on. He raised the Thunder Hellfire Godslayer high into the air, and a powerful bluish-purple light instantly caused his body to swell. With an angry roar, he struck out with all his might, and the lightning condensed into an enormous lightning blade, chopping down from the front. An ear-piercing sound of friction and a powerful collision erupted in an instant. Fury felt his body heat up, and he took a step back with a muffled grunt. With Ji-Dong's control, not a single bit of magical energy was wasted from the 700 commanders and lords of the Fire Ravens, as well as the Raven King. This combined attack was at the level of a single-target ultimate killing technique. With Fury's current level of cultivation, it was not difficult for him to block this attack with his divine weapon. If this was the outside world, he had absolute confidence that he could hold out against these Fire Ravens for a very long time and even have the opportunity to turn defeat into victory. However, this was the core of the earth. The abundant fire element ensured that the Fire Ravens had abundant supplies, while the lightning element was so sparse. Every single Fire Raven launched an ordinary attack, which was their extremely simple, instantaneous attack. Fury had to rely on his divine weapon to block the attacks, and the second wave of attacks had already arrived almost as soon as the first wave of attacks ended. Taking a beating passively was definitely not Fury's style. Once he was continuously attacked by his opponent, there would only be one result, and that would be defeat through attrition. It would be no different from before. They had already tried all sorts of dodging and other tactics, but reality had proven that none of them had any effect. Ji-Dong's ability to lock onto them was too strong, and he was extremely familiar with their fighting style. Trying to escape from Ji-Dong's lock would only be a waste of energy, and they would only lose even faster. Therefore, this time, Fury had already made up his mind to face this trial in the way he was best at. What was Fury best at? Without a doubt, head-on. That's right, head-on. When the Fire Raven's second attack came, Fury once again used the Hell's Thunder Divine Axe to block it. However, it wasn't just that this time. His eyes had already lit up, and blinding purplish-blue light suddenly surged out of his body like ripples. In that instant, the light within a radius of several thousand square meters suddenly dimmed, and the air was filled with the smell of lightning. In the next moment, tens of thousands of bolts of lightning had already appeared in the air like a forest of lightning. Each bolt of lightning wasn't particularly powerful, but there were so many of them that they densely covered every corner of the air within a radius of several thousand meters. Chapter 522. Demon's Domain. That's right, this was Fury's Demon's Domain. Even for Ji-Dong, this was the first time he had seen this Demon's Domain. This was also Fury's trump card that he had kept until now. In order to win in the trial, he had finally used it. Fury also understood Ji-Dong very well. He was very clear that if he continued normally, he would not have a chance at all. Therefore, long before the battle started, he had already deliberately shown weakness in order to make Ji-Dong ignore him. After withstanding the first round of attacks, he would rather suffer more attacks in the second round, and also released his Demon's Domain. Every heavenly stem, saint disciple, was familiar with the name of Fury's Demon Domain. It was called Thousand Thunder Calamity Domain. It was a replica of the Thousand Thunder Calamity Domain on the Holy Evil Island, or rather a smaller version. Although Fury's Thousand Thunder Calamity Domain was much weaker than the Thousand Thunder Calamity Domain, it was still an extremely powerful and rare pure offensive demon domain. Generally speaking, the Demon's Domain was used to support oneself, restrict the opponent, imprison the opponent, confuse the opponent, and suppress the opponent. Demon's Domain was the best, which could support oneself for a long time. However, Fury's Demon's Domain was completely different. His Demon's Domain could only exist for 5 seconds, and he could only use it 3 times a day at most. Under such circumstances, one could imagine the concentrated explosive power of his Demon's Domain. Within 5 seconds, thousands of thunderbolts would strike at the same time. Moreover, it was not an ordinary offensive thunderbolt, but a paralyzing thunderbolt. Once it hit the opponent's body would be paralyzed instantly, and they would lose the ability to resist and fight for a short period of time. It was most suitable for group battles, especially against opponents in the air. These days, Fury had been training himself, and he was also waiting for a better opportunity to display his power. Therefore, he had not used this demon's domain to participate in the trial. Now that he had suddenly used it, the instantaneous explosive power shocked all the heavenly stem saint disciples, including Ji-dong. Ji-dong could clearly see that the moment Fury's 1,000 lightning calamity realm was unleashed, not only was it extremely powerful, but also temporarily removed his ability to lock onto Fury. At this moment, Fury was like the god of thunder that had descended to the mortal world. His entire body was covered in lightning, and he looked like a huge lightning porcupine, which made it impossible for Ji-dong's soul power to approach him. The air within the area covered by the 1,000 lightning calamity realm was completely distorted, and there was even a unique smell of lightning. The most obvious characteristic of the demon domain that surpassed other demon skills was its suddenness. It was not like releasing a powerful demon skill that required the accumulation of demonic energy, but a process of release. The 1,000 lightning calamity realm was released too suddenly. However, it was also under this extremely sudden situation that Ji-dong's soul power also erupted with unprecedented strength. Lightning was the vital energy of heaven and earth. Generally speaking, soul and mental energy were most afraid of lightning, especially natural lightning. However, at this moment, Ji-dong completely released his soul power without hesitation. The power that his powerful saint-tier soul erupted in an instant was too terrifying, and the overwhelming soul power actually forcefully resisted Fury's 1,000 lightning calamity realm and enveloped the fire crows. With a muffled grunt, Ji-dong's body shook violently on the hill, and his face instantly paled a few shades. However, his feet were still nailed to the ground, and he didn't move an inch. Ji-dong used his saint-tier soul power to forcefully buy a whole 2 seconds for the fire crows. In the face of the 1,000 lightning calamity realm, a place that soul power didn't dare come into contact with, Ji-dong still forcefully reacted. He would rather damage his own soul to prevent the fire crows from being directly baptized by the 1,000 lightning calamity realm. Although the 1,000 lightning calamity realm only took an extremely short period of time to form, it was still about 2 seconds. Adding on the 2 seconds that Ji-dong had bought for the fire crows, there was a total of 4 seconds for them to react. Under these circumstances, every fire crow could still clearly feel the spiritual connection that Ji-dong had given them. Even Ji-dong himself didn't realize that when he'd covered the 1,000 fire crows with the power of his soul, every fire crow, starting from the Fire Crow King, looked at Ji-dong in a different light. That's right, the Fire Crow's intelligence wasn't very high, and they were even weaker than the Fire Elves, but this didn't mean that they didn't have feelings. On the contrary, magical beasts' intuition was even more sensitive than humans. Ji-dong subconsciously protected every single one of them, causing a warm current to flow through every single Fire Crow's heart. In their eyes, this great lord was no longer just a leader who could only bring them power, but also a master who they could wholeheartedly submit to and treat as a member of their own race. The Fire Crows were simple and direct. At this moment, they had truly acknowledged Ji-dong. Then, no matter what happened in the future, even if Ji-dong revealed his identity as a human, these Fire Crows would still follow him and pledge their lives to follow him. This was the special characteristic of the Fire Crows. They were a race that valued loyalty and integrity more than their own lives. A total of 4 seconds was the time that Ji-dong had bought for the Fire Crows. If it were Ji-dong himself, he'd be able to accomplish many things in just 1 second, much less 4 seconds. However, there were 1,000 Fire Crows in front of him. If they weren't able to react in time, then they'd have to face the baptism of the 1,000 thunder calamity head-on. This was no laughing matter. Unless Ji-dong personally acted, the fire crows would at the very least suffer heavy injuries. With Fury's strength, there was no longer any suspense in the outcome of this trial. At this moment, the powerful control of Ji-dong's soul power was undoubtedly displayed. Even though his soul was injured, his Saint-Tier soul was completely stimulated. Although he had a splitting headache, his mind was completely clear. Amidst the loud boom, as Fury had diverted his attention to release the demonic domain, he was directly smashed onto the Hell Thunder Divine Axe by the second wave of attacks from the 700 fire crows. His legs had completely sunk into the ground from the immense pressure, and his face was flushed red. Evidently, he was injured. However, he was very much looking forward to seeing how his little junior brother would deal with the demonic domain that he had used for the first time on the battlefield. Although he hoped that he would be able to obtain victory in this trial, he also hoped that his little junior brother would once again bring him some mysterious surprises. There were over 1,000 fire crows in this flock, and only over 700 of them attacked previously. That was because the other 300 were completely under Ji-dong's precise command. At this moment, they were the first to attack. Every one of the over 300 fire crows was strongly stimulated by Ji-dong's soul power. They had already developed a good habit of carrying out Ji-dong's spiritual commands without any reservations at the first instance. These over 300 fire crows were originally at the periphery. At this moment, under Ji-dong's command, they accelerated at full speed and charged out, colliding with the over 700 fire crows at the core. It was not difficult for Ji-dong to make the collective attack of over 1,000 fire crows produce multiple fusion effects. However, it was too difficult to make over 1,000 turkeys release a defense at the same time and produce a stacked effect. Putting aside whether Ji-dong could do it, these fire crows did not have enough mana. It was always easier to destroy than to protect, and this logic was definitely applicable in battle. A strange scene appeared. When the 300-plus turkeys collided with the 700-plus fire crows from different angles, all of the 1,000-plus fire crows were sent flying in all directions. They were originally on the same plane, but now they were sent flying at different heights in the air. Moreover, they were crowded together, making their formation look extremely chaotic. What was Ji-dong doing? The Heavenly Stem holy disciples had a huge question mark in their hearts. Of course, they knew that these fire crows were under Ji-dong's control, and they could also tell that Ji-dong was using his soul power to forcefully block Fury's demon realm to create opportunities for the fire crows. However, could it be that his soul power was in chaos because of the collision with the 1,000 Thunder Calamity realm, and he could no longer control the fire crows? Otherwise, why would there be such a chaotic scene? However, this question only lingered in their minds for a second. The 300 fire crows collided with each other at full speed, and it took a second for the fire crows to scatter. Another second passed, and on the third second, every fire crow seemed to have found their own direction. They flapped their wings and flew rapidly, and the previously chaotic formation was instantly sorted out. Every fire crow reached the perfect position, and they actually formed a straight line in the sky, like a transparent line of fire. On the fourth second, glaring sparks lit up on every fire crow, and the 1,000-crow stacked attack appeared for the third time. The 1,000 Thunderbolts Purgatory realm was wreaking havoc in the sky, but almost every bolt of lightning was a vertical attack. The 1,000 fire crows were already vertically in the sky, so they naturally only had to withstand the vertical lightning, which was equivalent to the size of a single fire crow. Under such circumstances, how could the attack of the 1,000 Thunderbolts Purgatory realm cause harm to the fire crows who had released the third wave of demonic power? Amidst the blinding red light, the lightning bolts that were attacking the fire ravens disappeared immediately, while the red light shot straight down towards Fury's head. How could this work? Even if it was prepared in advance, it would still be difficult for 1,000 fire crows to complete such a drastic change in formation in a short period of 4 seconds. The method that Ji-dong used was extremely simple, which was to reduce the area of attack, and it was also this simple method that played a sufficient role. However, every Heavenly Stem holy disciple knew how difficult this simple method was. To be able to achieve such a situation, it must have originated from the collision of over 300 fire crows. To be able to accurately control the angle, strength, and accuracy of each fire crow's collision, how powerful must Jidong's spiritual power be to able to achieve such an extent? In fact, this was also the case. When Jidong began to control, he ordered the over 700 fire crows to relax and not resist at all. Only then did he allow the over 300 fire crows to collide with each other. At that moment, he was neither happy nor sad, nor did he have any thoughts of victory or defeat. All he thought about was that he had to succeed. He really succeeded. Fury still couldn't believe that all of this was real when he saw the glaring red light descend on his head. Amidst the loud bang, the red light ruthlessly bombarded the ground 3 meters in front of Fury, leaving a deep hole in the ground. The air rippled with the aura of flames, and the distorted air and high temperature disappeared at the same time, along with 1,000 lightning calamity realms purplish-blue lightning. Silence. The surroundings were completely silent. The heavenly stem holy disciples were completely speechless. They deeply admired Jidong's divine control of the fire crows. They all understood that Jidong was on a completely different level from them. Fu Luo swung the Hell Thunder Divine Axe in his hand towards the ground, using the recoil to break free from the ground. He had a helpless expression on his face, but he was also sincerely convinced. I've lost. I didn't expect to lose so quickly even after using the demon domain. The fire crows in the sky returned to their circular formation under Jidong's command. They hovered in the air, blocking out the clouds and the sun. Jidong moved and arrived in front of Fury in a few leaps. He smiled and said, "Senior brother, you actually had such a trick up your sleeve. I was really lucky to have won that battle just now. I wasn't confident that I could have succeeded at all. Even if I were to do it again, I might not be able to do it. You don't have to belittle yourself. If I were to fight you, it would also be very troublesome to deal with your demon domain." Jidong wasn't being humble. Fury's 1,000 lightning calamity realms demon domain happened to be able to restrain his spiritual demon domain's fantasy silver. This was innately determined by the attribute. The lightning attribute could restrain soul power and could be said to be the nemesis of all spiritual demon domains. This was even more direct than Hua Er's Eyes of the Phoenix. How could any spiritual demon domain survive the bombardment of the 1,000 lightning calamity realm? If it wasn't for the fact that Jidong's soul power cultivation was much higher than Fury's, what he did just now was no different from suicide. Fury snorted and said, "Little junior brother, this is too unfair. Your soul power is so strong, and coupled with the demon power of these fire crows, as well as their battlefield in the core world, we don't have the slightest chance at all." Jidong chuckled and said, "It's right that there's no chance. Only under this kind of huge pressure, where there's no chance at all, can we promote everyone's cultivation. Next, Qianshu come." As he spoke, Jidong's gaze had already turned to Yao Qianshu. Jidong, don't you need a rest?" Everyone was not afraid of hardship when it came to cultivation, but it didn't feel good to be abused all the time. Meow Meow echoed from the side. "That's right. Jidong, you can't keep abusing us. If you have the ability, come and try it yourself. Let's also enjoy the sight of you being abused." Chapter 523. Me? Hearing Meow Meow's words, Jidong could not help but laugh. "I'll face the attacks of the fire crows. Who will control them? Without my control, the power of the fire crows will be greatly reduced." Meow Meow moved closer in a flash. Perhaps it was because her beloved man had just been abused by Jidong and the fire crows, but Meow Meow's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. "That's fine. The power of one fire crow has been reduced, but you can add a few more. You've trained these fire crows to have some tricks up their sleeves. As long as they're willing to attack you with all their might, you won't be able to handle them. Quick, let us see how you deal with these fire crows. Moreover, this competition of power must be fair." Jidong said helplessly, "How many fire crows do you plan to let me face? How will that be considered fair?" Meow Meow chuckled. "Well, First of all, you're the strongest among us heavenly stem holy disciples. Furthermore, these fire crows are no longer under the control of your saint-rank spiritual force. You'll have to face 2 more fire crows. This isn't too much, right? Jidong nodded. All right, 2 it is. Meow, meow hurriedly said. Don't be hasty. I'm not done yet. Not only that, we haven't forgotten that you're a fire attribute demon master. While this place is suitable for the fire crows to fight, isn't it also more suitable for you to fight? Furthermore, you've controlled the fire crows for so long and are incomparably familiar with them. This should double the difficulty to be considered fair. Therefore, you'll have to deal with all 4 fire crows at the same time. Jidong stared at Meow Meow, dumbfounded. A smile gradually appeared on his lips. He could now completely tell that Meow Meow was avenging Fury. All right, Meow Meow, don't talk nonsense. Fury looked at Meow Meow with some amusement. Although he seemed to be stopping her on the surface, in reality, Jidong felt that there were hints of encouragement in his senior brother's tone. All right, Meow Meow, I promise you. Without thinking too much, Jidong replied with a smile. This time, it was Meow Meow's turn to be stunned. She looked at Jidong and said, You agreed? Jidong nodded and said, I agree, for it is. I'll have all the fire crows split into 4 groups and attack me at the same time. I'll also do my best to counter their attacks. Is that okay? Fury said, Junior, it would be bad if you got hurt. Jidong shook his head. His voice and meaning were transmitted into the ears and minds of his companions through soul energy. There is no doubt that the unity of us heavenly stem saints is not inferior to fire ravens. We are a single entity. Everyone can even sacrifice their lives for each other. However, ask yourselves, do we have the same stubborn courage as Fire Raven? The courage to face difficulties and face them head-on, regardless of the cost. Such courage may be a little rash, but such unyielding spirit is what we need, because it can raise our battle strength to the highest level. In our eyes, the Fire Crows are a weak race. However, even such a weak race has many things that we can learn from. After saying this, Jidong threw his head back and let out a long howl under the gazes of his companions. He instantly transmitted his thoughts to the thousands of fire ravens in the air and the 3 groups of fire ravens resting not too far away. After receiving Jidong's message, the fire ravens were a little restless in the beginning, but they quickly flew into formation in an orderly fashion. The thousands of fire ravens that had been protected by Jidong's soul only transmitted the same message to their companions. From now on, Jidong's orders were everything to them, no matter what he told them to do. Influenced by the fire ravens led by the Fire Raven King, the 4,000 strongest members of the fire ravens were ready to attack with all their might. These days of training had greatly increased their overall strength, especially their teamwork. It was far from what it had been before. Jidong wanted them to pass on these methods of battle to every member of the Fire Raven tribe in the future, so he naturally wanted them to remember them deeply. Jidong's figure flickered as he charged into the air, the sacred fire armor instantly covering his body. The blinding golden red light made him look like a rising sun. The heavenly stem saints had been very surprised when Jidong had agreed to Meow Meow's trial, which she'd said was fair but was actually unfair. However, they'd understood after hearing Jidong's words that Jidong wanted to use his own actions to prove to them that his decision to borrow the power of the Fire Ravens to train everyone was absolutely correct. At the same time, he wanted to tell everyone that the Fire Raven formation wasn't invincible. The 4 Fire Raven formations had already begun their attacks when Jidong rose into the air. Over 4,000 magical creatures of the same attribute and race of the 4th level and above released their auras at the same time. One could imagine the pressure. All the experts of the Fire Raven tribe were gathered here. When the 4 Fire Raven formations were activated, the heavenly stem saints felt a suffocating pressure descend from the sky. Even Ajin, who had the strongest level of training, couldn't help but frown. The fire element in the air had become even more viscous due to the release of the magical power of the Fire Ravens. The pressure mixed with the dense fire element unique to the core of the world, creating a situation even more terrifying than the suppression of an attribute. Ji-dong's originally rapid speed immediately slowed down. For huge pillars of fire shot out at almost the same time. For primary single-target ultimate attacks shot towards Ji-dong at the same time. In this viscous air, even with Ji-dong's power of the soul, he couldn't escape the Fire Raven's lock-on. Ji-dong's power of the soul was strong, but with over 4,000 Fire Ravens and the support of the united battle method that Ji-dong had taught them, they weren't at a disadvantage in terms of the realm of the soul. The qualitative change caused by the quantitative change meant that Ji-dong couldn't do anything to them in terms of the soul. Seeing this scene in front of them, the Heavenly Stem Saints immediately tensed up. These were 4 single-target ultimate attacks. Although they were only at the primary level, they had never encountered a situation where 4 ultimate attacks shot out at the same time. These 4 powers came from the same source. Only the heavens knew what kind of changes would occur when they all landed on Ji-dong's body. At this moment, Ji-dong, who was floating in the air, suddenly flickered in a small area. A faint silver light instantly replaced the golden red light that was exclusive to him and enveloped his body. Whether it was the Heavenly Stem Saints or the Fire Ravens, there was only one feeling when they looked at Ji-dong. He was illusory, as if he was no longer a physical entity. In the next moment, Ji-dong's body had already rushed out diagonally. Indeed, he was still locked on by the 4 beams of light. Even though he had just released the fantasy Silver Demon realm, he was still unable to get rid of the lock and was still bombarded by the 4 beams of red light. However, he could decide which red light would hit him first. Even under such great pressure, he still forced himself to move horizontally at lightning speed. This alone had already demonstrated his strong resistance and adaptability to pressure. His movement immediately determined that the 4 beams of light would not hit him at the same distance. The Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples were worried that the 4 beams of light would hit him at the same time naturally did not exist anymore. This was the result of Ji-dong releasing his second demon realm and moving his body instantaneously. In that split second of judgment and decision, his performance was flawless and could be described as decisive and decisive. As he moved, the black and white Tai Chi demonic realm had already appeared behind Ji-dong. Strangely, the 2 balls of light at the core of his Tai Chi demonic realm actually showed the yin-yang fire assimilation formation. This was the improvement of Ji-dong's control over his soul power. It was impossible to release so many abilities in such a short period of time without a strong mental control as a backing. He turned around and threw a punch. It was simple, direct, and smooth. Ji-dong's essence, chi, and spirit had been completely raised to its peak when he threw this punch. With the help of his strong physical body and the 2 demon realms, his seemingly simple punch directly dispersed the first red light that had descended on him. However, Ji-dong's body only swayed slightly. The most shocking thing was that he used the assimilation formation to forcibly absorb a portion of the red light that he had dispersed. The red light enveloped his body and formed a layer of red light. At this moment, the other 3 red lights had already arrived. When the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples saw this, it was as if they could already see Ji-dong's failure. They did not expect that even without Ji-dong's control, the Fire Crows could actually reach such a level. Being chased by 4 single-target ultimate skills was equivalent to facing the simultaneous attacks of 4 magicians of the same attribute who had just advanced to the 9 crowns level. Moreover, the attacks of the Fire Crows were stacked. The demonic power released by each Fire Crow was not very strong. This determined that they could continuously attack. Even if Ji-dong could withstand the first round, he might not be able to withstand the second round. The 4 major Fire Crows could completely grind him to death easily. However, the ability that Ji-dong displayed next shocked the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples. He clapped his hands forward at the same time, and, of the 3 fire lights that came at the same time, 2 of them immediately paused in the air. Only one arrived in front of him, and his hands clasped together in front of his chest, forcibly clamping the red light. After the dazzling brilliance flashed, Ji-dong was still in the air, and the demonic power assimilated from his body had instead thickened by another layer. Only then did the last two red lights arrive in front of him. That's it. I don't know what method Little Junior used, but he also blocked my attack invisibly just now. I didn't expect him to even be able to delay the ultimate skill. Fury saw this and could not help but exclaim. That's right, it was the God Vanquishing Wall again. Ji-dong used the effect of the God Vanquishing Wall to forcibly separate the attacks that were originally coming at the same time. With the improvement of his mental strength, he could use the God Vanquishing Wall again every second, and its usefulness in actual combat was fully displayed at this moment. The erratic silver light threads around Ji-dong's body formed a strong halo with the fire elements assimilated from his body and the Tai Chi demonic realm, causing him to look extremely dazzling in the air. The last two beams of light came at him. This time, he did not use any techniques. He struck out with both of his palms at the same time. Two beams of black light flashed, and the extreme yin fire completely neutralized the attack. The yin-yang fire assimilation formation continued, and the red light surrounding him became even more intense. The first round of attacks from the fire crows was resolved just like that, and it seemed that Ji-dong did not expend too much energy. Next, Ji-dong showed his partners how he did under such a siege. The demonic realm of illusion was fully activated, and with a layer of red light absorbed from the fire crow's demonic power, he greatly offset the pressure brought by the fire crows. Under the protection of the demonic realm of illusion, his body was like a bolt of lightning, and he dashed towards the fire crows in the air. The fire crows could not pinpoint his exact location, nor could they lock onto his body. Ji-dong was very clear that it was impossible for him to confuse the 4,000 fire crows with the demonic realm of illusion. He did not have the powerful spiritual power to support the demonic realm to such a large area. Hence, he only released the demonic realm around his body, and in this way, he achieved the effect of shielding himself. The fire crows could only stack their attacks if they wanted to pose a threat to him. Scattering their attacks would not have any effect. Hence, he only needed to dodge 4 attacks from the fire crows in each round. The flying snake flash, combined with the demonic realm of illusion, completely achieved this. After dodging 3 rounds of attacks from the fire crows, he was already in front of the fire crows. That works too. The heavenly stem holy disciples finally understood that the effect of the spiritual realm was actually so great. Furthermore, Ji-dong also relied on his own fire attribute ability to assimilate a portion of the fire crow's demonic power after each attack, so that he could always maintain his peak state of demonic power. Once he attacked, he could even unleash a power that was even greater than his own. The difference between whether it was Ji-dong's command or not was completely revealed at this moment. If the fire crows were under Ji-dong's command, how could they not lock onto him? However, the training that these fire crows had received from Ji-dong was not without effect. Seeing that Ji-dong was rapidly approaching, the 4 fire crows hurriedly spread out and ascended at the same time, trying to widen the gap between them and Ji-dong as much as possible. If that really happened, neither side would be able to hurt the other, and it would at most be a draw. However, how could Ji-dong's speed be compared to that of the fire crows? Chapter 5:24. The flying serpent flash accelerated in a straight line, and he had already charged into a formation of fire crows. Ji-dong's entire body spun rapidly in the air, and then the heavenly stem holy disciple saw a layer of blurry golden light emit from his body. This light did not cover a large area, only about 100 meters in diameter. This fire crow formation enveloped about 200 fire crows. What is this? When the heavenly stem holy disciples saw this, a huge question mark appeared in their minds. But in the next moment, they were dumbfounded. The 200 fire crows that were enveloped in the golden light fell down at almost the same time. It was as if their strength had been completely sucked out, and they fell instantly. They were originally about 500 to 800 meters in the sky, but they fell for 300 meters. All of them struggled in the air in a panic. They only managed to control their bodies when they were about 100 meters from the ground, and they did not directly fall to the ground. However, These 200 fire crows did not fly again. They flew to the side dejectedly and left the battlefield. Elemental, stripping demon territory. Ajin cried out involuntarily. The heavenly stem holy disciples looked at Ajin in confusion. Chun Sichuan asked, "What's the elemental, stripping demon territory?" Ajin said, "This is the demon territory that my father is proficient in. Even I was unable to inherit this demon territory. Could it be that the demon territory can also be passed down? Why would Jidong?" As they were conversing, Jidong's figure continued to flash in the air, and the fire crows could no longer organize an effective attack. Even though the elemental, stripping demon territory that Jidong had released only had a diameter of 100 meters, which was far less than the range that his other two demon territories could control, wherever the golden light passed, the fire crows fell like harvested wheat. They fell about 100 meters from the ground before they could barely control their bodies and fly again. But they also left the battle. That's right. Jidong had relied on the elemental, stripping demon territory. With his current cultivation, the battle had actually ended the moment he charged into the fire crow's formation. He had the ability to continuously kill and injure these fire crows in large numbers. But of course, he could not do that. Hence, the scene that the heavenly stem holy disciples saw happened. With the elemental, stripping demon territory, the fire elements of the fire crows themselves and the fire elements around them were forcefully stripped away by Jidong. Without the support of mana, flying magical beasts like them would naturally be extremely uncomfortable, which was why they instantly fell. If Jidong wanted to kill them, he only needed to strip them more thoroughly, and he would be able to do so. However, he obviously held back, and it just so happened that the fire crows could recover after falling for a few hundred meters. He defeated them without harming them. The ingenuity of his control over the demon territory was amazing. After thousands of fire crows fell from the sky consecutively, Jidong stopped his actions. He stretched his body, and a silver light flashed. The silver demon territory of fantasy instantly spread out and connected to every fire crow. The fire crow's escape and attacks also stopped. There's no need to continue. Jidong's voice came from the sky. The heavenly stem holy disciples looked at each other. Fury could not help but say, "Is this still my little junior brother? He's simply a monster. One person, 3 demon territories. Haven't any of you heard of this before?" Meow Meow shook her head helplessly and said, "I have to give it to him." Yao Qinshu chuckled and said, "That's for the best. The stronger Jidong is, the stronger we heavenly stem holy disciples are, isn't that right?" Jidong descended from the sky and landed in front of his companions. Seeing the light on his body gradually fade, the heavenly stem holy disciples all revealed some respect in their eyes. Of course, Chen Sichuan would never have such an expression in her eyes. There was only endless love in her eyes. Jidong's gaze swept across his companions. His gaze was extremely resolute and burning with fighting spirit. He said, "Every devil master has their own specialties. It's true that this place is not suitable for you to fight. However, it is precisely under such harsh conditions that it is the best place to train our willpower in actual combat. Will our enemies give us the most suitable battlefield? No, absolutely not. No, definitely not. From the moment we became heavenly stem saints, we already had a heavy burden on our shoulders. We have no way out, and we can't hesitate. We can only continue down this path. The dark heavenly secrets are waiting for us, and the saints of darkness are waiting for us with the 10 divine weapons. Our efforts will be rewarded, and every bit of effort will increase our chances of survival on the battlefield in the future. Only by persevering will we be able to go further down this path. That's why I don't wish to hear any more complaints. I will grasp each and every one of your limits. The core world is our final training ground before the real war. The tragedy of the myriad thunders purgatory realm must not repeat itself. All right, Qianshu, it's your turn." This was the first time that Jidong had used a commanding tone to speak to his companions. It was only at this moment that he truly acknowledged his identity as the heavenly stem holy ruler. That was because he had just realized that a team needed a true leader who could convince his companions and lead everyone. Blindly being humble would never allow them to follow orders. The heavenly stem holy disciple was the core of the team, and he had to take on this responsibility. Only then could the heavenly stem holy disciples truly unite. When he said these words, Ji Dong was like a marshal commanding thousands of troops. His infectious and passionate voice made everyone's blood boil. Yao Qianshu didn't say anything else. He nodded forcefully at Hyoheim, and a jade-like turquoise light erupted from his body. Fury silently walked back to the all-elemental condensation matrix on the ground and sat down to cultivate and recover mana. The others did the same. There was no longer any slacking in their eyes, only determination. The theory behind the all-elemental condensation matrix was the same as the unrestricted fixed teleportation matrix they had created outside Mount Almonds. Under the leadership of Ji Dong, the 10 of them had specially created such a condensation matrix here and branded it on the ground. With the existence of this all-elemental condensation matrix, the heavenly stem holy disciples could absorb mana of various attributes. After all, this was only the second layer of the core world. Although the mana of various attributes was thinner than the outside world, it was not completely non-existent. The trial of the heavenly stem holy disciples continued, and so did the fire crow formation of the powerhouses of the fire crow tribe. In the sky, there was never a moment of pause. The heavenly stem holy disciples took turns to enter the battlefield, and the 4 fire crow formations also took turns to rest. Even when Ji Dong was mentally exhausted, he would only rest for a while before continuing the trial. The fire crow formation would continue to face the heavenly stem holy disciples. The days passed by in this continuous cultivation. The heavenly stem holy disciples had never experienced such intense cultivation before. While taking turns to rest and recover mana, their minds were filled with thoughts of how they could continue to win the battle. During the battle, they endured the immense pressure and tried their best to hold on for as long as possible. As for Ji Dong, he imprinted all kinds of battle tactics in the minds of the fire crows. The 4 fire crow formations in front of him were only the core of the entire fire crow tribe. What he wanted to do was to train the entire fire crow tribe into an invincible race for aerial combat. What he was training now was to train all the future commanders of this invincible race for aerial combat. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. It had been 40 days since the heavenly stem holy disciples came to the core world. Boom! Rocks flew in all directions amidst the violent explosions. The dark red rocks on the ground seemed to have come to life as they surged like waves in the sea. In the sky, the fire crow formation continuously shot down beams of blinding red light, bombarding the surging rocks as if they were searching for something. Good job. Lang Tiany's control of the earth has improved again. Fury, who was watching the battle, had a look of admiration in his eyes. The one currently fighting was the heavenly stem holy disciple, Lang Tiany. However, he was nowhere to be seen on the battlefield. The reason was simple. Lang Tiany was hiding in the surging sea of rocks. This was his unique demon domain, rock control. The ground in the core world, especially in this place, was made of rocks. Therefore, he could naturally control these rocks like a fish in water. Lang Tiany's cultivation had already broken through the 8 Crowns realm, so he naturally had his own demon domain. He did his best to shrink the size of the demon domain and increase the density of the demon domain's mana to interfere with Ji Dong's lock on him. After more than a month of battle, the heavenly stem holy disciples had thought of all kinds of ways to resist Ji Dong's soul suppression. Almost everyone had their own method. They were all very clear that only by escaping from Ji Dong's lock on them would they have a chance at victory. Ji Dong was still standing on a hill in the distance with his hands behind his back and his eyes closed. One could vaguely see a layer of faint silver light around his body. The 1,000 fire crows in the air were constantly changing their positions and forming different formations. They were neat and uniform. This was the result of countless tempering. At the same time, Ji-dong could finally control 1,000 fire crows at the same time, as if they were his own arms. Right now, he was controlling the fire crows in groups of 100, and they were bombarding the ground with mana. Indeed, under Lang Tiany's demon domain, Ji-dong couldn't completely detect Lang Tiany's location, but he could find the general area that Lang Tiany was moving in. This was enough for Ji-dong. Every round of 10 mana bombardment made Lang Tiany exhausted. This level of attack naturally couldn't harm him, but he was very clear that if he was hit by any of the attacks, Ji-dong would be able to lock onto his position. Then, in the next moment, 10 waves of mana would merge into one, and the fire crows would attack with all their might. The improvement of the fire crows wasn't just in terms of coordination. At the same time, the fire crows were also constantly evolving under Ji-dong's guidance. Their brains seemed to have been connected by Ji-dong's soul. Whether it was in terms of mana absorption, mana output, or the strength of their own mana, they were all incomparable to when the Heavenly Stem Saints had first arrived. This could be seen from the fact that all the fire crows had evolved to the Fire Crow Lord level. The most exaggerated was still the Fire Raven King. He was no longer the useless elder of the Flaming Bar Church from before. After devouring the Fire Owl Lord's crystal core and gradually absorbing it, the Fire Raven King's cultivation had risen to the level of a Class 9 magical beast. Although the crystal core couldn't help him break through to Class 10, Class 9 was already an invincible existence in the first few levels of the core world. To a race, having a powerful leader meant that the entire race was powerful. Just as Lang Tiany was about to be unable to withstand the repeated attacks of the Fire Raven formation and was about to be located, Ji-dong suddenly opened his eyes from atop the small hill. The Fire Raven King's attacks also stopped. It wasn't just the Fire Raven that was training with Lang Tiany that had stopped attacking him. The other 3 groups of Fire Ravens resting not too far away also rose into the air at the same time, instantly forming 4 large formations with the group that had been in the air. 4,000 Fire Ravens formed a hemispherical formation in the air, their gazes fixed in the direction of the entrance. Ever since the Fire Owl Lord had been killed by Ji-dong that day, the first 2 levels of the core world had remained the same. The Fire Ravens continued to toss the fire essence fruits that the fire spirits had planted into the entrance of the 3rd floor. According to the Fire Raven King, as long as they did this, the fire monkeys would naturally receive the fruits from the 3rd floor. The fire essence fruits themselves wouldn't be affected by the poisonous gas in the tunnel. Over the past month or so, no one from the 3rd floor had ever come to the entrance. At this moment, Ji-dong was controlling the 4 Fire Crow Grand formations to simultaneously target the entrance to the 3rd floor. It was obvious that he had sensed something. The Heavenly Stem disciples all ended their training, and Lang Tiany also revealed himself from within the boulder, looking towards the entrance as well. Was it a new envoy from the Flaming Bar? At this moment, an exceedingly powerful spiritual message gushed out from the entrance of the 3rd floor and instantly spread within a square kilometer. Who dares kill my younger brother? Weak and ignorant fire ravens, it will be difficult to quell the hatred in my heart if I don't slaughter all of you. The light in the Fire Raven King's eyes changed when he realized that it wasn't an envoy from the Flaming Bar, but he didn't show any signs of cowardice. He was now 8 meters long and had a wingspan of more than 10 meters. He'd become an exceedingly powerful rank 9 Fire Raven. Not to mention, he had Ji-dong behind him, so he had no reason to be afraid. A blinding red light suddenly exploded from the entrance of the 3rd floor. It was obvious that the practitioner who'd sent out the spiritual presence had also sensed the seriousness of the situation. The blinding red light instantly transformed into a pillar of fire 10 meters in diameter and shot out. The fire elements in the air suddenly retracted, as if they'd been completely absorbed by the pillar. It aimed straight for the Fire Raven King. The 4,000 Fire Ravens had already launched a collective counterattack, without Ji-dong needing to control them. Chapter 5:25. For 1,000 rays of light converged in the air and blasted towards the huge pillar of fire at the same time. It wasn't that Ji-dong didn't want to stack the power of the 4,000 Fire Ravens together. but it was because the effect of stacking would be very difficult to manifest once the number exceeded 1,000. Furthermore, the more the number, the harder it would be to control the stacking. 1,000 was already a limit, and this had already become a rule. Regardless of race, be it the mages, the Diamond Legion, the Annihilation Legion, or the Fire Ravens in front of them, they were all restricted by this rule. However, even so, the power of the 4 pillars of fire that were equivalent to 4 primary single-target ultimate skills was still extremely shocking. In the core world, most of the creatures were of the fire attribute, so there naturally wouldn't be the problem of elements mutually reinforcing or restraining each other. 4 against 1. Although their sizes were different, a terrifying flaming bar storm erupted in the air when the massive mana from both sides collided. The flames caused the temperature in the air to rise abruptly, and the core world, which originally had a thin amount of other elements, was instantly filled with fire elements. The 4,000 fire ravens flew out at the same time and spread out a little so that the aftermath of the explosion wouldn't cause them any harm. On the other side, the huge pillar of fire had also been completely destroyed. A puzzled voice rang out, and then tall figures flashed out from the entrance to the third floor one after another. These tall silhouettes flashed towards the third floor's passageway in an orderly and miraculously fast manner. In just a short while, they had already appeared in front of the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples and the Firecrow Formation. There were actually over 1,000 of these tall silhouettes that had suddenly appeared. Just by looking at their appearances, Jidong and the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples already knew who they were. The one leading them was at least 3 meters tall and had an extremely sturdy build. His muscles were bulging exaggeratedly, and there was a pair of huge wings on his back with black patterns that resembled spiderwebs. He had a total of 8 arms and looked like a King Kong demon. He was bald and had a single eye, and that large I was actually spitting out a foot-long red crystal light. The intense mana and spiritual undulations made it so that no one dared to look at it directly. Even Jidong couldn't help but be surprised by the terrifying aura. Fire Owl, that's right, it was a Fire Owl. And the one leading them was likely the head of the Fire Owl tribe, one of the 36 core elders of the Church of Flaming Bar. His aura was so strong that it was even stronger than Zhou Xiaoxiao's, who was at rank 95. From this, one could see just how powerful the entire core world was. There were 10 6-armed Fire Owl Lords following behind the Fire Owl King. Although only 2 of them had auras stronger than the Fire Owl Lord that Jidong had killed earlier, the pressure of 10 Fire Owl Lords surrounding the Fire Owl King had completely exceeded the combined strength of 4,000 Fire Ravens. Not to mention, there were hundreds of Fire Owl commanders and almost 1,000 ordinary 2-armed Fire Ravens behind them. Jidong saw the 2 that he'd let go among these ordinary Fire Owls. The Fire Raven King couldn't help but shudder when he saw the Fire Owl King appear with the elites of the Fire Owl tribe. The pressure that a greater race exerted on a lesser race in the core world made even his breathing quicken. He let out a shrill shriek and sent out the undulations of his soul. Esteemed core elder Fire Owl King, what do you mean by bringing so many of your clansmen to the territory of the Fire Raven tribe? Have you forgotten the restrictions of the Holy Faith? Greater races are not allowed to enter the territory of lesser races easily. Although the Fire Raven King's level of cultivation was equivalent to that of a Class 9 magical beast, how would the Fire Owl King pay any attention to him? He didn't even look at the Fire Raven King as he snorted disdainfully. The restrictions of the Holy Faith? Even the Sect Master has disappeared, and you're still talking to me about the restrictions of the Holy Church? Not to mention that you lowly little bugs have harmed my brother. Even the esteemed elders won't object to me completely exterminating all of you. Very well, all the little bugs of the Fire Raven tribe are here, saving me the trouble of looking for you. I can't kill all of you. I still need you to transport the Fire Essence fruits. But none of you leaders will be spared as sacrifices for my brother. Fire Raven King, you have my brother's aura on you. How dare you eat my brother's crystal core? It looks like I can't kill you yet. I'll make you suffer for 1,000 years in the purgatory of scarlet fire before killing you to appease the hatred in my heart. Jidong had a rough understanding of the situation from the moment the Fire Owl King had appeared and what he had said. It looked like his plan had failed. The two released fire ravens hadn't dared to report to the Holy Faith at all, and had instead attracted the Fire Owl King and the elites of the Fire Raven tribe to come for revenge. This wasn't to say that there was a problem with Jidong's plan, but that he didn't know that the Fire Owl commander he had just killed was the younger brother of the Fire Raven tribe's leader, the Fire Owl King. It was probably because of this that the two Fire Ravens hadn't dared to report back. After all, they were members of the Fire Raven tribe. But so what if they had come? Jidong sent his orders to the Fire Ravens with a single thought. The 4,000 Fire Ravens immediately retreated slowly. Jidong took a step forward and walked out from the small hill. He didn't seem to be walking very quickly, but he was already 100 meters away from the Fire Owl King after 3 steps. Is he the one who killed my younger brother? The Fire Owl King turned around and asked the two escaped Fire Ravens. Although Jidong couldn't understand the language of the Fire Owl tribe, he could sense the general meaning of the Fire Owl King's words from its soul wave. The two Fire Ravens hurriedly nodded in confirmation. When the Fire Owl King's single eye saw Hyoheim again, its eyes had become extremely cold. Originally, it was only 3 feet long, but now it had grown to 3 feet long. A powerful soul wave with an extremely evil aura came over. Although this soul wave couldn't be compared to Jidong's soul power, the evil aura it contained still startled Jidong a bit. Overall, this Fire Owl King's cultivation base was even higher than the 3-legged gold crow that he had killed. The Fire Owl race is ranked 18th among the more than 200 races in the core world. The Fire Owl clan is ranked 18th among the over 200 clans in the core world. Their overall strength is extremely powerful, but they're also one of the clans that kill the most. The Fire Owl King himself is ranked in the top 10 among the 36 core elders. I've only seen him in the Holy Church Conference before. He's extremely arrogant, and even the weaker clans in the core world are extremely afraid of him. It seems like he really wants to exterminate our entire clan this time. Great Lord, you must be careful. You are the only hope of our Fire Crow clan. If one were to look closely, they discover that all 4,000 Fire Ravens' eyes were filled with despair and grief, but they didn't cower in the slightest. Under the Fire Raven King's guidance, all 4,000 Fire Ravens let out a special squawk. A large number of Fire Ravens began to gather in the distance. Jidong looked at the Fire Owl King. He knew that the Fire Ravens would have been doomed if he hadn't been here today. Who knew how many Fire Ravens the Fire Owl King could have killed with his strength alone? It was time to test the strength of the Heavenly STEM disciples after 40 days of training. He would use the Fire Owl race as a sacrifice. Bastard, how dare you kill my brother? The Fire Owl King glared at Jidong with his single eye, but didn't take another step forward. When he tried to suppress Jidong with the strength of his soul, he was shocked to find that he couldn't invade this man who looked completely human, but had been called a 3-legged crow by his 2 idiots. Although this young man had the aura of a 3-legged crow on him, he was certain that Jidong wasn't a 3-legged crow. He wouldn't be so easily deceived with his level of cultivation. However, Jidong had put him on his guard. It was extremely rare for someone to reach the Fire Owl King's level of cultivation in the core world. Although the Fire Owl King was arrogant, he was no fool. Jidong's boundless strength of the soul made him extremely wary. What kind of enemy was the scariest? The answer was simple. An unknown enemy was the scariest. Looking at the Fire Owl King, Jidong spoke indifferently. In the core world, the strong are respected. Your brother dared to swallow the invitation of my Fire Crow race. This in itself is against the rules of the Holy Church. Moreover, who do you think you are to dare question me? Ha ha! The Fire Owl King laughed wildly. Puny human, how dare you speak such nonsense in front of me? Don't say that you're not a 3-legged crow. Even if you are, you still dare to oppose my Fire Owl race. Today, these Fire Crows will die, and so will you humans. The Fire Owl King is mine, the rest are yours. Leave none alive. Jidong's cold voice echoed in the air. He was speaking in the human language, so the Fire Owls naturally couldn't understand him. However, the Fire Owl King understood from the murderous intent in Ji-dong's eyes. He found it hilarious. Just a few humans and these little bugs in the air can stop the elites of my Fire Owl race? What a joke. Kill them all. The Fire Owl King waved his hand, and in the next moment, his lightning-like gaze shot straight at Ji-dong. This wasn't an attack of soul strength, but pure mana. A needle-like red light instantly appeared in front of Ji-dong. Ji-dong had experienced this innate ability from the Fire Owl commander he had killed earlier. Among magical beasts, almost 90% did not have a demon domain. Magical beasts like the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the Eclipse Phoenix, who had a demon domain, were extremely rare. However, almost all magical beasts had their own innate ability. Even the weakest magical beast was no exception. The Fire Owl King had used its innate ability as soon as it appeared, not only because it hated Ji-dong to the core, but also because it valued Ji-dong's strength. Ji-dong's eyes flashed as well, except his eyes had turned silver. At the same time, the scene in front of every heavenly stem saint changed. The positions of over 1,000 fire owls and the analysis of their strength were all presented in their minds. Ji-dong's soul strength had already connected them together. Raising his right hand, Ji-dong's figure flashed lightly as he charged at the Fire Owl King. The red light from the Fire Owl King's eye paused in the air for a moment, losing its lock on Ji-dong. Ji-dong easily dodged the Fire Owl King's innate ability and appeared in front of him, throwing a punch at his chest. The Fire Owl King's expression changed. He was clearly shocked by the mysterious skill, the God Destruction Wall. However, his reaction wasn't slow at all. As one of the top 10 core elders in the core world's flaming bar, he had experienced countless battles and massacres in his life. Who knew how many core life forms had fallen in his hands? His rich combat experience could be counted in hundreds of years. Seeing that Ji-dong was about to cut in front of him, the Fire Owl King didn't take it head-on. Instead, he retreated 10 meters at lightning speed, his 8 arms moving in front of him at the same time. Each of his hands made a strange gesture, and the 8 gestures happened to converge in front of his chest. Dense mana fluctuations instantly erupted. What Ji-dong saw were 8 runes condensed from flames. Then, the 8 runes overlapped and a huge suction force appeared. Ji-dong only felt his body becoming sluggish for a moment, and at the next moment, a huge fire pillar had already blasted at his chest from the point where the 8 runes overlapped. It was undoubtedly a super sure kill skill. The might of this fire pillar was exactly the same as the one he had used against the 4,000 fire crows. Not only was this a mid-level single-target super sure kill skill, but it was also a super sure kill skill that was almost instantaneous. It relied on those 8 weird symbols. Ji-dong vaguely guessed that those 8 symbols should be existences similar to the 5 elements formation. It seemed like there was no lack of abilities similar to the 5 elements formation in the core world. The attack was too fast, and they were so close. Ji-dong's God Destruction Wall allowed him to dodge the Fire Owl King's innate ability, but he couldn't dodge the lock-on of the Fire Owl King's innate ability. But it was also at this moment that the Fire Owl King's pupil shrank. He saw an unbelievable scene. Ji-dong reacted in a short period of time that the Fire Owl King launched his Fire Owl King's ultimate skill. The Supreme Ultimate Demon Domain first appeared behind him, accompanied by the Yin-Yang Fire Assimilation Array. At the same time, the golden radiance of the Elemental Stripping Demon Domain met the Fire Owl King's ultimate skill. Although it couldn't dispel the skill, it relied on its powerful stripping ability to strip away the Fire Owl King's ultimate skill. Not only that, but Ji-dong's body that was charging forward came to an abrupt halt. He stopped in the air, completely violating the laws of the world. He made a circle with his hands and pressed down in the air. At the next moment, a huge black fire pillar soared into the sky, blocking the weakened Fire Owl King's ultimate skill. Chapter 5:26. In the face of the Fire Owl King's almost instantaneous mid-level sure kill skill, Ji-dong reacted in an extremely short time. The Tai Chi demonic domain behind him, accompanied by the assimilation array, forcefully pulled in a portion of the fire elements in the air and even the opponent's attack, making it impossible for the Fire Owl King to use those 8 strange hand gestures to pull in all the scattered fire elements in the air. Then, Ji-dong released his elemental stripping demonic domain to forcefully strip away the Fire Owl King's attack, buying time for himself and also weakening the Fire Owl King's attack. In the end, he pressed both palms on the ground, and a thick black pillar of fire rose from below, blocking the Fire Owl King's attack in midair. One had to know that all of Ji-dong's reactions were completed in an instant. To be able to control his mana to such an extent, the strength of his soul could be imagined. In the past 40 days, Ji-dong had spent most of his time practicing control. If his previous cultivation was all about improving his mana and understanding of his skills, then this period of time was a process where he used his Saint-tier soul to thoroughly master all the skills he had in the past. When he used them, he would no longer feel the slightest bit awkward. Instead, he would be able to use them smoothly and easily. One shot forward, one reflected. When the 2 fire pillars collided, the Fire Owl King's body trembled slightly, while Ji-dong took a step back. Neither of them gained the upper hand. The Fire Owl King's originally frightened mind instantly calmed down at this moment. From the collision of their mana, he was completely sure that the human youth in front of him was at least inferior to him in terms of mana. Otherwise, that collision just now wouldn't have been a tie, and he would have been the one at a disadvantage instead. The Fire Owl King's battle experience was too rich. Seeing that he wasn't at a disadvantage, he immediately used an extremely unreasonable stance to directly collide with Ji-dong. He had already determined that Ji-dong's soul power should be above his, but his mana was inferior. Thus, with his experience, he wanted to force Ji-dong to confront him head-on. He didn't believe that Ji-dong could control every collision so skillfully. As long as he grasped the slightest opportunity, he was confident that he could consign Ji-dong to eternal damnation. The upper 4 of the Fire Owl King's 8 arms were like blades, slashing down like 4 sharp blades. Ji-dong could even see the flickering metallic luster on the edge of his palms. The Fire Owl King's 8 arms weren't inferior to 8 mana weapons. After pouring a large amount of fire mana into them, their might was absolutely terrifying. Not only the upper 4 arms, but the lower 4 arms also formed different hand shapes and pushed out at the same time. It was like 4 punches bombarding different parts of Hyoheim's chest and abdomen. The all-out attack almost covered all the vital parts of Ji-dong's upper body. Whether it was the mana output, attack angle, or choice of power, the strength displayed by the Fire Owl King was far from what the Fire Owl Overlord that Ji-dong had killed before could compare to. There was no doubt that the Fire Owl King's melee ability was extremely powerful. If the Fire Owl King only had 2 arms, then Ji-dong would definitely choose to fight it head-on without hesitation. But this guy had 8 arms, and each of them contained great power. If he could only hit 2 of its arms, then what about the other 6? Ji-dong had his own methods, and his combat experience wasn't lacking either, especially when it came to melee attacks. His eyes flickered with a powerful light as he released the elemental stripping domain once again. The Fire Owl King only felt its mana leaking out as it suddenly lost connection with the fire elemental energy in the surroundings. Even its own fire mana was sucked away. At the same time, Ji-dong raised his left hand and pulled his right hand in his direction. When the Fire Owl King was already in front of him, he made a series of reactions in that critical moment. Without a doubt, the closer the opponent was, the shorter the reaction time would be and the greater the danger. But at the same time, the closer the opponent was, the harder it would be for him to change his attack. The Fire Owl King's 4 arms felt as though they were blocked by an air wall. What it couldn't understand the most was that it couldn't find any trace of Ji-dong's aura in the air wall. Even though the air wall could only stop its attack for a split second often meant eternity on the battlefield. At the same time, the Fire Owl King's body also stopped for a split second. Then, he felt an enormous suction force pulling 2 of the 4 arms that he had used to attack Hyoheim. The 2 arms that were originally charging forward instantly accelerated, while the other 2 arms were slightly raised due to this sudden change and couldn't form a joint attack. Moreover, because the four arms above him were blocked, the Fire Owl King's body had already turned into a bow shape and was being pulled by Ji-Dong's God Annihilation Guide. His two arms were already in front of Ji-Dong. It doesn't matter if you have 8 arms as long as I control them, so that only 2 of them can collide with me. This was Ji-Dong's strategy, who said that the advantage of spiritual strength would be weakened in close combat. Ji-Dong's control over his body, mana, and timing had turned his disadvantage of being inferior to his opponent into an advantage. A fierce glint flashed in the Fire Owl King's eyes. The demon domain of elemental stripping was extremely uncomfortable for him, and Ji-Dong's various actions made it so that he could only collide with his 2 arms. But even so, the Fire Owl King didn't panic at all. In an instant, he poured all the mana in his body into his 2 arms that were being pulled by Ji-Dong. Ji-Dong took half a step back, retracted his arms, and pushed them forward again. On the left was his pitch-black left hand, and on the right was his right hand that was as shiny as gold. Ultimate dual flames were contained within them at the same time. Boom! The 4 punches collided, and the victor was decided in an instant. Under the Fire Owl King's all-out injection of mana, Ji-Dong's body was blasted away like a cannonball, even with the help of the elemental stripping domain. As for the Fire Owl King, he stood there motionlessly. The members of the Fire Owl race cheered at the same time. However, their cheers only lasted for a moment before they stopped abruptly. That was because the Fire Owl King did something completely incomprehensible. Out of the Fire Owl King's 8 arms, the 2 uppermost arms suddenly straightened their palms like blades and directly chopped off the 2 arms that collided with Ji-Dong's. The 2 arms were instantly chopped off and flew to both sides. Then 2 violent explosions sounded at the same time. The 2 arms that were chopped off had already turned into a ball of gold and a ball of black flames, respectively, emitting powerful mana fluctuations in the air. Ji-Dong's body flew backwards, but his soul remained locked onto the Fire Owl King. He could not help but shiver inwardly when he sensed the Fire Owl King's reaction. It was indeed a good decision to cut off one's wrist. It seemed that any one of the 36 core elders of the Sacred Flame Church would be an astonishing figure on the surface. The Fire Owl King's reaction was undoubtedly the most correct. Although Ji-Dong was blasted away by the Fire Owl King's mana, Ji-Dong's fists also forcefully broke through the Fire Owl King's body. Ji-Dong had already cultivated the deity Annihilation Strike to the 6th layer, and the power that could be unleashed with the 6 layers was imaginable. After the deity Annihilation Strike entered the Fire Owl King's arms, it immediately attacked his chest. The Fire Owl King's mana couldn't stop them at all. If the 2 mana collided on his chest, the combination of the Yin Fire Exterminating Strike and the Yang Fire Exterminating Strike wouldn't be as simple as losing 2 arms. In order to avoid being heavily injured, the Fire Owl King made the most correct response at the first possible moment, which was to abandon his arms and crush Ji-Dong's plan. The Fire Owl King's arms were severed cleanly, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. The Fire Owl King's expression didn't change at all, as though the arms that were cut off didn't belong to him. However, the glint in his eye became even fiercer. Just like how Ji-Dong had been watching him, the Fire Owl King had also been watching Ji-Dong. He had clearly sensed that Ji-Dong's mana was indeed inferior to his. Moreover, in order to inject the deity Annihilation Strike into his body, Ji-Dong's mana resistance was much weaker. That was why he was sent flying. However, Ji-Dong was floating quietly in midair. Judging from his appearance, he didn't seem to have suffered any injuries at all. This was a greater psychological blow to the Fire Owl King than the loss of his 2 arms. Losing an arm of the Fire Owl race was like losing a lizard's tail. It was also a kind of innate skill. After returning, the Fire Owl King would naturally have a way to reattach the 2 arms. However, the expected effect of losing 2 arms didn't appear. The other party wasn't injured, but the Fire Owl King had lost 2 arms. This was really a loss. Ji-Dong wasn't injured. He had naturally made ample preparations for this clash. Just like the Earth Dragon Ancestor had said, after soaking in the Earth Dragon Ancestor's ancestral dragon bloodline, Ji-Dong's current physical strength made it difficult to even injure him. Without the strength of a saint-rank cultivator, it was impossible to truly kill him. Jidong had used his saint-rank physique to forcefully disperse the Fire Owl King's attack. His body had only suffered a slight jolt and was far from being injured. They'd clashed head-on twice here, and the battle on the battlefield had already begun. Under Jidong's orders, the ordinary Fire Ravens didn't participate in the battle. The Fire Raven King soared through the air with his 4 Fire Raven formations, sending out wave after wave of powerful ultimate attacks, specifically targeting the ordinary Fire Owls with only 2 arms. Under these circumstances, it was only natural that the Raven King would attack one at a time. Dozens of Fire Owls had fallen to the Fire Raven formation's attacks in just a short while. The Fire Owl tribe was one of the top-ranked tribes in the core world, so they were naturally no pushovers. After discovering the threat posed by the Fire Crows, the 1,000 ordinary Fire Owls rose into the air at almost the same time and charged murderously towards the Fire Crows' 4 formations. The Fire Crow formation was extremely powerful, but it could only fire 4 powerful attacks at a time. The Fire Owl tribe had paid the price of dozens of lives and were about to reach the Fire Crows. However, the Heavenly Stem Saints were unable to help the Fire Crows at a time like this. They also had to face the overwhelming number of powerful Fire Owls. Apart from the Fire Owl King and Jidong, the 10 6-armed Fire Owl Lords had already led over 100 4-armed Fire Owl commanders to find the Heavenly Stem Saints. The Heavenly Stem Saints were powerful, but the number of enemies they had to face was just too great. Even the commanders had surpassed Class 8 magical beasts. They fell into a bitter battle as soon as they were surrounded by so many experts. The situation immediately became disadvantageous to the Heavenly Stem Saints and the Fire Crows. The Heavenly Stem Saints were fine. They could still break out of the encirclement if push came to shove. They were completely capable of fleeing under Jidong's guidance. But what about the Fire Crows? Once the 4 formations were broken through by the Fire Owl tribe, the other Fire Crows apart from the Fire Crow King would definitely die if they faced the Fire Owl tribe at close range, even though they were outnumbered 4-1. Once all the elites of the Fire Crow tribe died, the Fire Crow tribe would be done for. Jidong's eyes were filled with severity at this moment. It wasn't that he had made any mistakes in his commands, but that the Fire Owl King was giving him too much pressure. Although the Fire Owl King's cultivation wasn't on par with Lin Qing, who'd almost killed Jidong, it was about the same level as Lin Qing's husband, Lin Ilay. In addition, the Fire Owl King was more experienced than Lin Ilay, and he wasn't at a disadvantage in terms of attributes. Jidong's mana was inferior to his opponent's, and the pressure from the Fire Owl King made it difficult for him to divert his attention to attend to the 4 formations. It was already quite good that he could support the Heavenly Stem Saints in terms of soul scouting. What should I do? Jidong was now faced with a choice. The appearance of the Fire Owl tribe had been too sudden, and the battle had started too quickly. He didn't have any time to prepare at all. He naturally wasn't afraid of the Fire Owl King. But what about the Fire Crows? There was still time to break out of the encirclement now. But the Fire Ravens had been completely annihilated after all. Putting aside the fact that his hard work over the past month had been wasted, emotionally, Jidong would never allow such a situation to occur. A long howl erupted from Jidong's mouth. Then, the void was torn apart, and a red light flickered on his wrist. 2 enormous figures had already soared into the sky, charging straight for the flock of Fire Owls. It was the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the Eclipse Phoenix. Jidong had decided to go all out. His eyes were filled with ferocity at this moment. Chapter 5:27. Jidong knew that his reaction had been too slow and that some of the Fire Raven elites would have been injured by the time the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix had rushed forward. However, that was all he could do now. He needed to kill the Fire Owl King in front of him as quickly as possible, while the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix needed to buy as much time as possible and reduce the Fire Raven's losses. As for the Heavenly Stem Saints, he'd only given 2 words of instruction: persevere. It wasn't that Jidong didn't want to use the formation right off the bat, but that the Fire Owl King was simply too strong. With the Fire Owl King's abilities, he could have had his clansmen temporarily keep the Heavenly Stem Saints busy while he himself joined in the attack on the Fire Raven elites. If that really happened, then Ji-dong would be forced into an even more passive position. Therefore, he needed to keep the Fire Owl King busy and take care of this greatest threat first. Of course, the longer he dragged things out, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Heavenly Stem Saints. After all, they had no supplies in the core of the earth. Just as a harsh light flashed through Ji-dong's eyes, and he was prepared to kill the Fire Owl King at all costs, the Fire Ravens had already given everyone, including him, a great shock. Even without the Fire Raven King's orders, the tens of thousands of ordinary Fire Ravens that had already gathered in the distance took to the skies when the Fire Owls were about to reach the great formation of Fire Ravens. They didn't have any complicated techniques or great strength, but they had life and bodies. Tens of thousands of Fire Ravens rammed into the Fire Owls in the air from all directions. Their unstoppable momentum caused them to raise their speed to the fastest they'd ever been in their lives. They used their bodies to buy time for the Fire Raven King, the Fire Raven Lord, and the Fire Raven Commanders. Thousands of Fire Ravens had fallen almost instantly when they'd collided with the Fire Owls. Their bodies had been torn to shreds in the face of the Fire Owls' powerful attacks. But it was they who'd used their lives to buy time for the Fire Ravens. No matter how strong the Fire Owls were, their speed of ascent had come to a screeching halt in the face of the onslaught of so many Fire Ravens. The tens of thousands of Fire Ravens were like a screen of flesh and blood, blocking the Fire Owls' charge for the Raven King and the Fire Ravens. Ji-dong was stunned, and so was the Fire Owl King. It was impossible for Ji-dong to give such an order, and it was also impossible for the Fire Raven King to do so. Everything that was happening in front of them had been carried out by the Fire Ravens themselves. The scene was tragic, but also shocking. More and more Fire Ravens charged forward with an unstoppable will, and not a single one of them hesitated in the face of certain death. Fear had appeared in the Fire Owl King's heart for the first time. It wasn't because of Ji-dong's strength, but because of the Fire Ravens. The Fire Ravens, who had been like ants in his eyes, had now brought him great shock. Every Fire Raven was using their lives to fight for the future of the Fire Ravens. The Fire Ravens were crazy, but it was this madness that ignited the bloodthirst of all the Fire Ravens and ignited the blood of Ji-dong and the Heavenly Stem Saints. Their blood and hearts were boiling. They'd never experienced such a scene before. Even the most elite of human armies were far from being as united and unafraid of death as the Fire Ravens. The Fire Raven King's eyes had turned bloodshot. He didn't order his clansmen to stop, but led the 4 Fire Ravens in attacking with all their might. The deaths of his clansmen couldn't be in vain. Their deaths would only be worthwhile if all the Fire Ravens were annihilated. The Fire Raven King's soul cried out and screeched. Every elite Fire Raven's soul seemed to have been elevated in this moment, and their attacks had reached an unprecedented level. Without Ji-dong's command, their attacks seemed to have grown eyes. For streaks of light shot out every time, but they were always able to find the densest areas of the Fire Ravens. One after another, the Fire Ravens fell from the sky after killing a large number of Fire Ravens. The Fire Raven's charge was no longer as resolute as before. It was at this moment that the sacred evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix finally arrived. The sacred evolution Fire Dragon had always been bloodthirsty. How could the bloody scene in front of it not ignite the ruthlessness in its heart? The Phoenix was the king of all birds. As it watched the Fire Crows, which were also birds, fall one after another, but continued to charge forward, Hwa'er's fighting spirit had already risen to an unprecedented level. The strong practitioners of the Fire Ravens had all gone to surround the Heavenly Stem Saints. The ordinary Fire Ravens, whose average strength was at 7th level, were like tigers among a flock of sheep after the sacred evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix had charged in. The situation in the sky was instantly reversed with the combined efforts of the Fire Ravens, as well as the help of the sacred evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix. The death toll of the Fire Ravens rose rapidly, and corpses fell from the sky one after another. Although the fire ravens had suffered even greater casualties, their deaths were absolutely worth it. Not a single elite fire raven had died in a battle before them up until now. Fury raised the Hell's thunder axe and roared angrily. Are we inferior to the fire ravens? Kill! As the thunder god descended, Fury's body instantly expanded. Hundreds of thousands of lightning bolts bloomed on the battlefield at the same time. The Thousand Lightnings purgatory realm enveloped the hundreds of Inferno Owl powerhouses surrounding them. Even if they were overlords, they would be paralyzed in the face of this strange attack. The Heavenly Stem Saints responded to Fury's words with their actions. 3 golden rings of annihilation flew out at lightning speed, and the head of a fire raven commander was instantly sent flying, bringing with it 3 pillars of blood. The Heavenly Stem Saints, who had been holding back previously, completely erupted at this moment without holding anything back. Other than Tianji, who was protected in the center, the other 9 people's demon domains erupted in a fixed direction. In that instant, the power and fighting spirit that had been suppressed for many days was completely ignited. Terrifying magic instantly wreaked havoc, and the 10 leading fire ravens were sent retreating almost at the same time. Immediately after, a large number of casualties occurred among the weaker fire raven commanders. The advantage of multiple attributes was undoubtedly evident. The vast staff of the goddess of earth was inserted into the ground, and the sticky soil restricted the flying ability of these elite fire ravens. In the next moment, a meteor shower fell from the sky. This was the cooperation of the wolf, heavenly will, and the ultimate dual earth element attacked together, completely suppressing the power of these elite fire ravens. The most destructive power was undoubtedly Ajin and Fury. Every time Ajin's Widowmaker attacked, it would definitely take away some of the fire raven's limbs. The golden rings of annihilation were even more elusive. Every time those powerful fire ravens charged at them, they would definitely be greeted by the powerful impact of the golden rings of annihilation, causing those fire ravens to be unable to unleash their full power. Among the 5 elements, water was metal. In this world full of fire, it was very difficult for Lan Bauer and Du Ming to unleash their full power. Thus, they chose to support. Du Ming followed behind his sister like a shadow, using Ultimate 9 water to support Ultimate 7 metal, while Lan Bauer followed Ajin, using Ultimate 10 water to support Ultimate 7 metal. Under such circumstances, although the magical elements in the air that belonged to them were almost non-existent after the raging fire elements, the Heavenly Stem holy disciples were still able to continue fighting. Looking at everything in front of her, Chun Sichuan's feelings were the most complicated. The core world had given birth to her previous life, and she had also ruled this place for thousands of years. The Holy Church of the Flaming Bar was established by her, and all the rules were the same. However, even she did not know much about the fire ravens. It was difficult for such a weak race like the fire ravens to even exist in her memories. However, everything that the fire ravens had displayed at this moment shocked Chen Sichuan the most. She would never be able to forget the scene in front of her eyes. Before this, nobody was happier than she was when Ji Dong was unwilling to kill the creatures in the core world. Of course, she knew the reason. It was because this place was once a self-ruled place, which was why Ji Dong was unwilling to kill the creatures in the core world and cause grief for the dead Flaming Bar in his heart. Just now, when Ji Dong decisively gave the order to kill, Chen Sichuan still could not understand it. In her subconscious, the Fire Owl tribe held a much more important position in the core world than the Fire Ravens. However, Chen Sichuan now realized that she was wrong. One was the powerful Fire Owl tribe that stirred up trouble in the core world, while the other was the extremely united Fire Ravens that struggled bitterly at the bottom of the core world. Ji Dong had chosen the latter. Without a doubt, when the Fire Owl King and the elites of the Fire Owl tribe appeared here, only one of the 2 tribes was destined to continue living in the core world. Ji Dong's choice was correct. A tribe that was so united and had such a large number of people, how could their potential be compared to the Fire Owl tribe? Moreover, The fire ravens were completely under Ji-dong's control. According to Ji-dong's will, the fire ravens would only work hard for the peace of the core world in the future and not destroy other tribes arrogantly like the Fire Owl tribe. Thank you, Ji-dong. This was the only thing that Chun Sichuan wanted to say to Ji-dong. She completely believed that Ji-dong would definitely not cause trouble in the core world and would only work hard for the peace of the core world. The battle between Ji-dong and the Fire Owl King had also reached its climax. When the battle between the sky and the ground unfolded, Ji-dong had already charged towards the Fire Owl King once again. A glaring golden-red radiance burst forth without reservation, and the demonic domain of elements stripping instantly enveloped the Fire Owl King. The demonic domain that belonged to the ancestor of the Earth Dragons was extremely domineering. With its existence, the difference in mana between the two sides was greatly reduced. Ji-dong took a step forward with his right leg and glided close to the ground. Under the effect of the flying serpent flash, he dashed forward like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, the supreme ultimate demonic domain had already turned into a pitch-black crescent moon behind him. However, this crescent moon did not have the silhouette of the dark flame Devil King. From a moment Ji-dong possessed his own radiance, he was no longer the inheritor of the Flame Tyrant King and the Dark Flame Devil King. Instead, he was a powerful being that possessed his own unique power. Seeing the black crescent moon behind Ji-dong, the expression in the Fire Owl King's eyes changed. Fear appeared in his eyes this time, and the thoughts in his soul surged out. Lord Dark Flame Devil King. This was a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. The Fire Owl King was too familiar with the Dark Flame Devil King's demonic technique. Back then, before the flaming bar had appeared, it had followed the Dark Flame Devil King. At the next moment, Ji-dong's left hand had already swung out. Time and space seemed to have completely frozen at this moment. All that was left was the straight-line distance between Ji-dong and the Fire Owl King. A piece of dark purple solid ice sped along the ground towards the Fire Owl King. The Fire Owl King understood the Dark Flame Devil King very well. Of course, he knew what this was. Without any hesitation, his remaining 6 arms formed hand seals at the same time, and a huge pillar of fire shot towards the dark purple solid ice. The fear in his heart made him not dare to attack Ji-dong. At this moment, the Fire Owl King already had the intention to retreat. Boom! A huge black pillar of fire appeared along with the Fire Owl King's attack and soared into the sky. The Fire Owl King had just heaved a sigh of relief, but the next moment, his gaze turned into astonishment. The pillar of fire didn't disappear. Instead, it rose up one after another and arrived in front of him in an instant. Impossible with his mana. How could he not use the forbidden 100,000 serene flame ice, but the forbidden 1,000, 10,000 great serene flame ice? The Owl King's mind was filled with such doubts. He couldn't understand how Ji-dong could instantly use a skill that had already reached the level of an advanced sure-kill skill. Of course, he couldn't understand. Just like when Lin Ilay was defeated by Ji-dong, Lin Ilay couldn't imagine that he would be defeated by a kid who had just broken through the 8 crowns. Because they didn't understand the 5 elements array, let alone the existence of the 5 elements perpetuation array. When Ji-dong almost killed Lin Ilay with a slash, he triggered the huge amount of mana stored in his yin-yang crown and transformed it into the Fire God Sword, truly activating the Fire God Sword. With the improvement of his cultivation, the mana stored in the perpetuation array no longer needed to be displayed by dragons and snakes, but could be directly used in actual combat. It was precisely because Ji-dong could always burst out with mana that was far beyond his own ability that he could defeat enemies whose cultivation was far beyond his. Boom! The black pillar of fire devoured the Fire Owl King's body in the end, and the great silent flame, ice couldn't be dodged at all. This was a terrifying power that controlled time, and it could only be resisted with mana. When the dark moon appeared, the fear in the Fire Owl King's heart had already restricted its performance, not to mention that it underestimated the great silent flame ice. In an instant, its body had already turned into a pitch-black ice sculpture. Chapter 528. The only thing the Fire Owl King could do when the ice of tranquil flaming flame attacked was to sever both of his arms at the last moment and turn them into a layer of flesh and mana that covered his body to resist the powerful corrosive power of the ice of tranquil flaming flame. He understood that as long as he could hold on for a short period of time and escape, he would still have a chance to leave this place. At this moment, he no longer had any wishful thinking. The Fire Owl tribe had suffered a great defeat in today's battle, but as long as he could return alive, then everything was still possible. After all, the Fire Owl tribe's position in the Holy Church of Flaming Bar was incomparable to the Fire Ravens. As long as he returned alive, he would naturally have a way to incite the Holy Church to target the Fire Ravens. Unfortunately, why would Ji Dong give him another chance? The mana in the perpetuation matrix burst out and pushed Ji Dong's mana to the same realm as the Fire Owl King. It must not be forgotten that Ji Dong had dual attributes. After the ice of tranquil flaming flame was unleashed, the remaining half of his mana allowed him to maintain a high output. A glaring golden light shone in front of the Fire Owl King's chest. That golden light was completely contained in Ji Dong's fist, making his right fist look like a transparent golden lock. What Ji Dong gave the Fire Owl King was a simple but full-powered scorching Sun Triple Strike and Brilliant Sun All. The glaring golden light sank into the pitch-black ice again and again. At the last moment, Ji Dong was like a huge golden all that flashed in front of the Fire Owl King, and the black finally retreated quietly. Boom! The black and gold mixed pillars of fire soared into the sky, accompanied by the Fire Owl King's mournful cries. Its tough body was blown into pieces. Even Ji Dong did not expect the battle to end so quickly. The Fire Owl King perished in his hands because of the sudden burst of power from the perpetuation matrix. But more importantly, it was the deterrence from the Dark Flame Devil King that made the opponent lose his composure. In a contest of this level, how could Ji Dong give the Fire Owl King another chance when one of them lost their mind and faced such a powerful attack from the other? At the same time that Ji Dong went berserk, the Heavenly Stem Holy Apostles also went berserk. Similarly, using the Everlasting Matrix, the 9 Heavenly Stem Holy Apostles went against their previous method of forcing the Lord-class Flame Owl Lords to retreat as much as possible. Instead, they went after the 9 Lord-class Flame Owl Lords. The Fire Owl King's screams before his death were a huge shock to the entire Fire Owl tribe. The timing that the Heavenly Stem Saints attacked was when the Fire Owl Overlords were in shock. In an instant, everyone unleashed the mana within the Yin and Yang Corona. Although they could not sustain 2 Corona like Ji Dong, the mana brought by a single mana was enough to instantly double their attack power. The Heavenly Stem Saints, who were not at a disadvantage in the first place, suddenly unleashed the mana within the perpetuation matrix. Coupled with the shock of the Fire Owl Overlords, it was clear who had the upper hand. Meanwhile, the Fire Owl commanders with 4 arms were already afraid of being killed, and could not help at all. Bearing the brunt of the attack, Fury's Hell Thunder Divine Axe had already achieved results under the powerful attack of the Thunder God's Descent. 2 Fire Owl Overlords were forcefully hacked away by him. Their bodies were covered in lightning, and it seemed like they would not survive. Ajin's attack was not inferior to Fury's at all. The golden ring of annihilation quietly wrapped itself around the neck of a Fire Owl Overlord, while the eunuch maker in his hands cut off all 6 arms of a Fire Owl Overlord. 4 of the 10 great Overlords were instantly eliminated, while the remaining 4 Overlords were also sent flying by the combined attacks of the Heavenly Stem Saints. They were more or less injured. At this moment, 2 tall figures silently appeared behind the Fire Owl Overlords that were sent flying. Their movements did not make the slightest sound, and each of them protected 2 Fire Owl Overlords at the same time. In the next moment, the bodies of the 2 Fire Owl Overlords turned into ashes amidst mournful cries. Ji Dong's method of commanding the battle was very similar to his own in actual combat. He pursued instantaneous explosive power and abruptness. Under these circumstances, it was the easiest to defeat powerful enemies. The word surprise had long since been engraved into Ji Dong's soul. Although this method of battle was rather thrilling at times, once he got in the way, the enemy would not even have a chance to counterattack. That was exactly what had happened right now. Not only had the heavenly stem saints suddenly erupted, the Dark Flame Lord and Fire Lord who had been hiding underground had also received Ji Dong's orders the moment the elites of the Fire Owl clan had appeared. They worked together with the heavenly stem saints and killed another 2 Fire Owl overlords. The strength of the heavenly stem saints had increased after 40 days of training, and the fire ravens had also benefited greatly. The 2 elemental beings that Ji Dong had summoned hadn't been idle either. They'd constantly absorbed the dense fire element in the air and grown on their own. Their cultivation had already risen to the level of a Class 8 magical beast after 40 days. They weren't strong enough to deal with the Fire Owl Lord on their own, but they were more than enough to ambush the injured and terrified Fire Owl Lord. 6 of the 10 Great Lords had been eliminated, and the Fire Owl King had been smashed to pieces by Ji Dong's powerful attacks. The instantaneous eruption on the battlefield had already determined the outcome. "I'll leave the ground to you." Ji Dong's voice rang out in the heavenly stem saint's ears. He'd already soared into the sky at this moment. He couldn't let his fire ravens continue to die. He'd already given the Fire Raven King of Death order the moment he'd taken to the air for all the ordinary fire ravens to immediately retreat from the battlefield. The Fire Owl clan wasn't doing too well in the battle in the sky either. With the ordinary fire ravens acting as a barrier and using their lives to protect the elites of the fire ravens, as well as the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipsing Phoenix, the Fire Owl clan had suffered so many casualties that even they found it hard to believe. More than a third of the 1,000 Fire Owls had fallen since the beginning of the battle, and this number was constantly increasing. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's powerful tail hammer was the most lethal. Combined with its transmigration technique and the eruption of ultimate dual flames, at least 50 Fire Owls had perished at its hands. Ur's attacks weren't as direct as the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragons, but her usage of magic wasn't any less than the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragons. Every time she spread her wings, at least a few Fire Owls would die. Moreover, the 2 powerhouses' battle abilities were always at their peak in this world full of fire element. Blinding red light flashed through the sky as 8 black, 8 gold, 8 fire dragons, and 8 flying serpents exploded from Ji Dong's body at the same time. This was his full strength. Ji Dong was still able to use such an enormous amount of magic even after killing the Fire Owl King. It had to be said that this was the core of the world, and also because his Tai Chi demon domain and formation had helped him absorb large amounts of fire element from the surroundings. 16 solid streams of energy rushed into the flock of fire owls. The fire owls, who had already lost their will to fight, no longer cared about anything else after leaving behind dozens of corpses. The Fire Owl King was already dead, and they weren't fools. Who would be willing to lose their lives here for nothing? All of them frantically fled towards the entrance of the 3rd floor. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, Eclipsing Phoenix, and the Fire Ravens in the sky chased after the Fire Owls, continuously killing one Fire Owl after another. Meanwhile, Ji Dong's body had disappeared after unleashing that tyrannical attack. The first Fire Owl finally rushed to the entrance of the 3rd floor. Its single eye was already overjoyed. As long as it rushed into the passageway and survived, it would have a chance to take revenge. Moreover, it wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. Survival was its greatest hope now. However, in the next moment, it saw a huge hand. The Fire Owl only felt its vision blur, and it no longer had the ability to breathe. Ji Dong's body had already arrived at the entrance of the 3rd floor of the core of the world. With a light slap of his palm, the first Fire Owl that had flown over had already stopped in midair. In the next moment, its body exploded and turned into countless fragments and blazing flames, blocking the path of its other companions. Ji Dong's powerful spiritual aura was released without reservation. I said that I won't leave a single one alive. Do you think you can leave after killing so many of my clansmen? A 9-meter-long beam of red light burst forth from Ji Dong's right hand. A terrifying killing intent mixed with saint-rank spiritual aura surged out. With a wave of the 9-meter-long sword, more than 10 fire owls at the very front were sliced in half, their corpses scattered in all directions. The fire god's sword was finally unsheathed. Previously, tens of thousands of fire crows had died at the hands of the fire owls. Those fire crows were all very weak. Even an ordinary fire owl's attack could take away a large number of fire crows' lives. How could Jidong give the fire owl race another chance? He had let 2 fire owls go last time, but they brought back so many fire owls, which made him deeply understand the principle of cutting weeds at the roots. This time, he definitely wouldn't let the same situation happen again. The Fire Owl King was already dead, and this race that was ranked 18th in the core of the world would definitely be removed from the list. A feeling of weakness spread throughout Jidong's body. He had fought the Fire Owl King, released all his mana, and even released the Fire God Sword. Fortunately, his spiritual power was already strong enough, and the soul of Massacre God Shupness had been completely suppressed by the Fire God Sword during this period of time. Otherwise, Jidong really wouldn't have been able to hold on. At this time, a beautiful arc appeared at the corner of Jidong's mouth, and he muttered to himself, "Every time I need you, you are always by my side. This feeling is really good." A dark green radiance quietly swept out from behind Jidong at this moment. 2 spring-like arms passed under his shoulders and hugged his chest. Pure Emu Wood mana was fully released, and Jidong's originally dim golden-red radiance instantly flared up again. His mana was recovering at an astonishing speed, and what was even more frightening was that his tyrannical Saint-Tier soul had been upgraded once again. The terrifying pressure made the more than 400 fire owls not dare to attack the wide entrance of the 3rd floor again. Ajin and Fury were already on a killing spree, while Meow Meow and Lang Tianyi were working together to restrict the powerhouses of the Fire Owl clan from escaping. Although the others were less useful, each of them had already successfully killed the Fire Owl commander, and were doing their best to assist Ajin and Fury. It was precisely in this situation that Chun Sichuan was able to free up her hands, and when Jidong needed her the most, she poured her mana into Jidong's body. With Jidong in front, and the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and Eclipse Phoenix behind, as well as all the elites of the Fire Crow clan in pursuit, the Fire Owls paused for a moment before launching a suicidal charge in Jidong's direction. They had no choice but to move. If they continued to stay where they were, they wouldn't be able to survive either. Only by breaking through the barrier that was Jidong could they preserve their lives. Unfortunately, they encountered Jidong, who was assisted by Chen Siwei. The Fire God's sword had transformed into a screen of death. How could ordinary fire owls with level 7 cultivation possibly charge past Jidong? The ultimate demon domain, the elemental stripping demon domain, and the illusory silver demon domain were all activated. The fire owls were in chaos, and their casualties increased. They had already lost their final chance. Jidong was like a killing machine. The Fire God's sword didn't have much technique. It relied on its explosive speed and strength. The terrifying heat was something that even the fire owls, which lived more than 10 levels underground, couldn't withstand. In just a short while, Jidong's kill count had already surpassed the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. Buzz, the red light, drew a strange arc in the sky, and the last 3 ordinary 2-armed fire owls were instantly slashed down. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's attack was ultimately a step too slow, and the elites of the fire crows in the sky had completely quietened down. Jidong didn't stop. He retracted the Fire God's sword and accelerated once again. He was like a machine that didn't know fatigue as he rushed to the side of the Heavenly Stem Saints. His saint-level physique allowed him to have sufficient stamina to continue his attacks. 5 elemental cycle array formation. Jidong's deep voice rang in everyone's ears. The Heavenly Stem Saints could sense Jidong's soul becoming incomparably clear. Under Jidong's guidance, each of them took the most accurate steps. In the next moment, the 5 elemental cycle array formation with Jidong as the core was completed. The 10-colored light circulated around Jidong and the others. The heavenly stem saints who had expended a lot of energy instantly felt as if they had been reborn. Ji-dong howled at the sky, and the others instantly returned to Ji-dong's back. The five elemental cycle array formation was changed to mutual enhancement. Layers of enhanced mana were finally concentrated on Ji-dong's body through Yao, Qianshu, and Chun Sichuan's dual-wood flames, and the might of the tyrant burst forth. Chapter 529. The fire god's sword reappeared, and a terrifying light that seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth apart swept across the land. A terrifying sword light that was 3 meters deep and over 10 meters wide swept across the sky, leaving not a single blade of grass in its path. Even the rocks were completely vaporized. The remaining elites of the Fire Owl tribe fell amidst the cries of agony. This was an existence that was definitely equivalent to a high-level sure-kill technique. Over 1,000 fire owls had invaded the second layer of the core world, and so had their last signs of life. From the beginning to the end of the battle, it only took the machine a short period of time. But both sides had paid a huge price in this extremely short period of time. Even though the fire ravens were numerous, those who had died were still fresh lives. Those ordinary fire ravens who were only equivalent to rank 2 magical beasts had used their lives and flesh to create an opportunity for the more powerful fire ravens. They were worthy of respect and admiration. The heavenly stem saints could see that even if they weren't here, the fire ravens would still have to pay a huge price if they wanted to win this battle. The millions of fire ravens would definitely fight to the last man. Apart from the Fire Owl King, no one would dare say that they could block the combined attack of the fire ravens. Woo! A low buzzing sound rang out from the Fire Raven King's mouth, and the same sound spread out like a plague. Every fire raven let out the same mournful cry, silently mourning for their fallen clansmen. Ji-dong put away the fire god's sword. His face was extremely pale at this point, and his mental state was extremely poor due to the large consumption of his mana. However, his eyes sparkled with the light of gratitude. Ji-dong put his right hand to his chest and slowly bowed towards the area with the most fire raven corpses on the battlefield. His heart was filled with reverence. The heavenly stem saints stood behind Ji-dong and did the same. These fire ravens were worthy of respect. Even though they were so small and weak, the strength and cohesiveness within their bones was enough to make any opponent tremble in fear. The deathly silence continued for a few minutes before Ji-dong slowly stood up. His spiritual undulations also spread out with Chun Sichuan's help, so that as many fire ravens as possible could sense his thoughts. Great clansmen, we have obtained a great victory. This victory was not bestowed upon you by me, but by you yourselves, who said that our Fire Crow clan is weak. Today, we will use our own strength and our unparalleled cohesiveness to annihilate the elites of the Fire Owl clan. From today onwards, the Fire Crow clan will rise. From today onwards, there will definitely be a place for our Fire Crow clan in the core of this world. Those who have died, your lives will not be in vain. I declare that all the Fire Owl clan's crystal cores, including the Fire Owl King's crystal core, are your spoils of war. You can choose the most outstanding clansmen to enjoy the power of these crystal cores and let them help you evolve. From today onwards, the Fire Owl clan will no longer exist in the core world. When they heard Ji-dong's words, the sorrowful cries from the fire raven's mouths gradually turned into excited cries of happiness and pride. Ji-dong gave the Fire Raven King an order to clean up the battlefield. The Fire Raven King personally led the elites of the Fire Raven tribe to gather the corpses of the dead clansmen. There was no such thing as a proper burial in the core world. All of the dead would return to the embrace of the fire element. Fire was their final home. There were simply too many fire ravens. It only took an hour for the Fire Raven King to personally set fire to the corpses of his clansmen. Thousands of fire owls, including the cores of the Fire Owl King, piled up like a small mountain in front of Ji-dong. Ji-dong only needed to use his spiritual power to scan the area briefly to discover that there wasn't a single core missing. It was exactly the same amount as when the Fire Owl tribe had arrived. Not a single fire raven had coveted the cores and secretly swallowed them up. The Fire Raven King spread his wings and slowly came to a stop in front of Jidong. His face darkened with agitation as he spoke to the latter through their souls. Didn't I say that these cores belong to the ordinary clansmen? Why aren't you distributing them? The Fire Raven King shook his head and spoke respectfully to Hyoheim. Great Lord, we never thought that we'd be able to defeat the mighty Fire Owl tribe one day. It was your arrival that led us to create such a miracle. We don't need these spoils of war. They belong to you, of course. Bullshit. Are you going to disobey my orders? Jidong roared angrily, his boundless aura immediately causing the Raven King to be greatly frightened. Jidong's gaze softened as he looked at the Raven King in front of him and thought of the heroic looks of the ordinary fire ravens who died. I've said that this victory belongs to the fire ravens. I won't take a single one of these cores. The Raven King was silent for a moment before speaking to Hyoheim. Great Lord, the corpses of the fire owls are already great nourishment for us ordinary clansmen. It's enough for some of our clansmen to evolve. However, the energy contained within these cores is far too great. It's not something that normal clansmen like us can absorb. For a clan to be strong, we must first have great strength. We can't always rely on you. Therefore, I think that it's better for the leaders and lords in the group to absorb these cores so that they can evolve greatly like me. This way, our fire ravens will have a batch of core strength. This way, if today's situation occurs again, we will be able to deal with it. What do you think? Jidong looked at the Raven King with some surprise and thought that not only had the Raven King's cultivation level evolved, but even his brain seemed to have evolved as well. He nodded and said, since the corpses of the fire owls are enough for ordinary clansmen to evolve, then we'll do as you say. You and all the commanders and lords can absorb these cores. The Fire Owl King's core is yours. I hope that your cultivation level will have broken through to level 10 the next time I see you. At the very least, you can't be any weaker than the Fire Owl commander I killed first. The Raven King was shocked rather than happy after hearing Jidong's words. He said in a panic, Great Lord, you're leaving us? Jidong smiled faintly. I'm not leaving you, just temporarily. Have you forgotten that the Holy Faith is holding the selection ceremony for the acting head? It's time to participate. Of course, we still need to obtain enough tokens to participate in the ceremony. It looks like we can only learn from the Fire Owl tribe and steal from the other clans. As he spoke, Jidong flipped his wrist, and 2 items appeared in his palm. Both were tokens, but one was golden and the other was dark red. They were about the same size. The golden token was long and narrow, and there were many strange patterns and characters engraved on it. It exuded a faint aura. The dark red token was extremely rich in fire element, and it was even scalding hot. There were 2 ancient characters engraved on it, but Jidong didn't know what they were either. This is the Fire Owl King's core elder token and the token to participate in the ceremony. The Raven King immediately gave an answer. These 2 medallions had been obtained by Jidong when he'd killed the Fire Owl King. According to the Raven King's introduction, the golden medallion was the medallion for the elders to attend the celebration, and the dark red medallion with an extremely dense fire element was the symbol of a core elder. Raven King, can you tell me what materials were used to forge this core elder medallion? Jidong asked the Raven King. He could clearly feel that if he could refine or use to forge this token into his demonic wine, he'd likely be able to store even ultimate techniques, much less ultimate techniques. The Raven King shook his head. I don't know what kind of, or this is either, but it should be from the depths of the Earth's core. Since it's used to forge the core elder token, it should be extremely valuable. Jidong nodded. It looks like we can only go deeper into the Earth's core to find the answer. The Raven King looked longingly at Jidong. Great Lord, when do you plan to leave? Jidong said, We'll rest for a day and set off tomorrow. We can't waste any more time. Remember, you and your clansmen are to absorb the Fire Owl cores as soon as possible after I leave. Don't leave any traces after the Fire Owl corpses are eaten, lest the Holy Sect finds out. If anyone asks, say that you've never seen the Fire Owl tribe appear. Then, you and the elites who've trained with me before must teach the ordinary clansmen the great fire crow formation that I've taught you. If all the fire crows can use this formation, we won't have suffered such heavy losses. Yes, I will obey your orders. The Raven King lowered his head and slowly bowed to Jidong. Jidong lifted his head to look at the fire crows in the sky, his eyes full of emotion. He sighed lightly. Don't tell anyone that I'm leaving. We'll talk about it after we've left. I don't want to experience parting. Do you understand? The Raven King nodded softly. For the Heavenly Stem Saints, this was the most difficult battle they'd faced ever since they'd formed the team. It looked like they'd won a complete victory, but in reality, everyone understood that they'd won this battle out of pure luck. If it hadn't been for the Fire Crows, the Heavenly Stem Saints would have likely been able to break through the encirclement and escape unscathed. It was precisely because of the Fire Crows' production that the Fire Crows had expended a great deal of their energy, and the Fire Owl King had been frightened by Jidong's display of the Shadow Flame Devil's abilities. That was why they'd been able to end the battle so quickly. One mustn't forget that this was the core world and not the outside world. The Heavenly Stem Saints had all sat down on the ground by the time the battle had ended and immediately entered a state of cultivation. Their mana had basically been drained. If the Fire Owl King and Jidong's battle had lasted a little longer, the Heavenly Stem Saints would have likely been defeated without the support of external mana. Of course, the Heavenly Stem Saints' ability to continue fighting in the core world and their calm and teamwork during the battle were all due to their hard work during this period of time. Jidong's performance was even more obvious. The fact that he'd been able to defeat the Fire Owl King so quickly and not lose the upper hand in the previous battle was directly related to his saint-level control over the soul. If it wasn't for the fact that he'd mastered all that he'd learned, it wouldn't have been easy for him to defeat an expert of the Fire Owl King's level. Jidong sat down next to his companions and used the formation to ignite the yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements, cultivating and recovering with his companions. His heart wasn't at peace as he cultivated. Although he'd wiped out all his enemies in the battle with the Fire Owl tribe's elites today, he wasn't at ease. The Fire Owl tribe was ranked 18th among the hundreds of tribes in the core world. It seemed that they were quite powerful, and the fact that the Heavenly Stem Saints were able to defeat them showed how fast the Heavenly Stem Saints had improved. However, the Fire Owl tribe was only ranked 18th after all. Furthermore, the ones that had just appeared were definitely not the entire Fire Owl tribe. There were 17 other powerful tribes in the core world before the Fire Owl tribe, as well as the 35 core elders of the Flaming Bar and the 3 mysterious supreme elders. From the strength of the Fire Owl King, Jidong could estimate the terrifying strength of the 3 supreme elders. They might not be inferior to the Dark Flame Devil King and the Flame Tyrant King that were killed by the Flaming Bar back then. If that was the case, the danger of this trip to the core world would be greatly increased. However, Jidong wouldn't back down now that he'd come this far. He had to attend the selection ceremony of the Flaming Bar's saint, but the words Flaming Bar were extremely attractive to him. He even harbored a little hope that the 3 supreme elders might have a way to help him resurrect the Flaming Bar. After all, he still had the 9 geocentric red lotus seeds left behind by the Flaming Bar. Even if the chance was so slim, Jidong had to give it a try. Otherwise, he would never be satisfied. Not only had the Heavenly Stem Saints recovered their mana after meditating for an entire day, they'd also memorized the various insights they'd gained from the battle. What was gratifying was that Lan Bauer, Du Ming, and Du Xer's mana had all improved, and they were a little closer to becoming the 8 crowns. There was no day or night in the core world, and one could only rely on one's memory of time to judge time. Jidong gathered everyone together after everyone's mana had recovered. Jidong had also transmitted the same message to his companions when he'd conversed with the Fire Raven King yesterday. It was time to leave. Chapter 530. When they arrived at the entrance to the 3rd layer of the core world, Jidong looked around at his companions. They all looked at him with determination. The performance of the Fire Crows had greatly stimulated the Heavenly Stem holy disciples. Even the weak Earth's core beasts could be so united and release such a strong cohesiveness. How could they be weaker than the fire crows? The battle experience and insights gained from the previous day's battle were secondary. More importantly, it had raised the fighting spirit of the heavenly stem holy disciples to an unprecedented level. This was because they were all thinking about the scene of the holy war between the two continents not long after. They definitely did not wish for their companions to use their lives as a shield like the ordinary fire crows. They were even more unwilling to see the civilians and soldiers of the Radiant Five Elements mainland being slaughtered by the enemy. Only by becoming stronger could they use their own strength to protect those fresh lives. The sacred evolution fire dragon crouched down, and the heavenly stem holy disciples floated up. The Lord of the Dark Flame and the Lord of the Flames followed closely behind Jidong. However, the first to fly up was not the sacred evolution fire dragon. Following a loud phoenix cry, the eclipse phoenix had already soared into the sky and was the first to fly towards the entrance to the third layer. Jidong did not put back into the vermilion bird bracelet. This was because he wanted to use its eye of truth to coordinate with his own soul detection. The dangers of the core world had been presented to them time and time again. They could not afford to be careless. Hua's phoenix cry had awakened a large number of fire crows. When they saw the sacred evolution fire dragon soar into the sky, Jidong had already led the heavenly stem holy disciples and disappeared at the entrance to the third layer. The cries of countless fire crows reverberated throughout the entire second layer of the core world. This long cry lasted for a full 3 days before gradually coming to a stop. Jidong had not only brought them power, but also dignity. This great lord had been deeply engraved into the hearts of every fire crow. With Hua's eye of truth and the phoenix's ultimate dual flames, any poisonous gas that came close was completely melted by the flaming bar. The second passage to the core world was even faster than the first. Compared to the second layer, the third layer of the core world was brighter. When Jidong and the others passed through, they did not encounter any obstacles. The passageway between the first and second floors was guarded by the fire giants, and the passageway between the second and third floors was guarded by the Raven King and all of the Fire Raven elites. Although the Raven King and the Turkey elites weren't as strong as the fire giants, they could mobilize tens of thousands of fire ravens, and their overall strength surpassed the fire giants. The surrounding temperature had obviously risen by a few degrees. As far as the eye could see, the red color of the ground had also become brighter. Jidong stood on top of Mao Tai's head and slowly clenched his fists. In a deep voice, he said, "Our training in the core world has just begun. We still have 1.5 months. Our goal is to obtain enough tokens to participate in the celebration and reach the 15th floor of the core world." Fury said, "Little junior brother, are you going to fight for the position of the acting hierarch?" After a moment of silence, Jidong said, "I'll try my best. Let's create an unrestricted fixed teleportation formation here as well." Fu Luo was stunned for a moment and said, "Isn't there already one outside?" Jidong shook his head and said, "From the looks of it, the power of the core world has far exceeded our expectations. Although unrestricted fixed teleportation can be done anywhere, the further the distance, the longer the preparation time is. From now on, we will set up such a formation every time we go deeper into the core world. We will strive to be able to teleport away as quickly as possible when we encounter danger." Jidong paused and looked at his companions with a burning gaze. He said, "Do you guys think that I'm the leader of the Heavenly Stem Saints, the Heavenly Stem Saint King?" The Heavenly Stem's saints nodded at the same time. Only Tianji looked at Jidong with a slight frown. Jidong continued, "If that's the case, my words are orders. In the core world, if we encounter an undefeatable enemy in the future, you must immediately activate the teleportation formation and leave as soon as I announce the retreat. There's no delay. I will cover the retreat." "No," Qin Sichuan almost blurted out. Jidong's sharp gaze instantly landed on her face. "I've already made up my mind. I'm the strongest amongst the heavenly stem saints, and I have a saint-grade physique. The Earth Dragon ancestor once said that it's not easy for me to die, even if I want to. If I encounter any danger that I can't handle, then I'll only be able to leave after all of you evacuate. The more time you use, the safer I'll be. Don't argue with me about this, unless one of you has the ability to defeat me. I won't hesitate to give this position to that person. I'm the one who brought everyone to the core, so I have to be responsible for everyone's safety. Danger exists at all times, but if any one of us dies, I'll definitely be the first. The heavenly stem's saints fell silent when they heard Ji Dong's words. However, there was something else in their eyes. Fury gritted his teeth so hard that the muscles on his cheeks bulged. In terms of character, they all knew that Ji Dong was right. However, in terms of feelings, who would agree to it? At this moment, Ajin, who rarely spoke, suddenly spoke up. She used her unique, icy tone and said indifferently, "If a person stands in our way, we will kill them. If a god stands in our way, we will kill a god." These simple words express the thoughts of all the heavenly stem saints. As long as they were undefeatable and undefeatable, how could the situation that Ji Dong mentioned happen? The core world, the 15th level. The first 14 levels of the core world had multiple entrances. Even at the 14th level, there were 2 entrances. However, from the 14th level onwards, there was only one entrance. The 15th level was simply a world that was carved out of red crystals. The rocks on the ground were all sparkling and translucent red crystals. If one looked closely, they would even discover that there was a viscous liquid flowing under the crystals. Was it that scorching lava? In the core world, most of the races lived between the 5th and 10th levels. There were more than 200 races living in these 5 levels. However, at the 15th level, the number of races living there was only slightly more than the 1st and 2nd levels. The first level of the core world was mainly inhabited by the Fire Spirit tribe, while the 2nd level was inhabited by the Fire Crow tribe. There were very few races there because the fire element there was far from active. As long as it was allowed, no race in the core world would be willing to live there. Only when the fire element was abundant would it be able to better aid the evolution of the creatures in the core world. However, the 15th level was a place where 70% of the races could not live. The temperature was as high as 80 degrees Celsius, and even the air would often distort. Those who could live there and rule over the 15th level were undoubtedly the most powerful races in the core world. In the entire 15th level, there were a total of 3 races: the Fire Demon tribe, the Fire Spirit tribe, and the Fire Lotus tribe. These 3 races were known as the strongest races in the core world. As for the 16th, 17th, and 18th floors of the core world, it was a world that not many of the 3 races knew about. Most of the experts only knew that the Flame Tyrant King and the Dark Flame Devil King lived on the 16th and 17th floors respectively. The 2 great sovereigns constantly waged war in order to fight for a place to live. In the end, they were killed by the flames that walked out of the 18th floor, thus unifying the entire core world. The last 3 floors were no longer a place that ordinary creatures could live in. It was said that only the 3 great elders of the Holy Flame Church could enter. Listen to the guidance of the great god of the Flaming Bar. The 15th layer of the core was not very big. However, there were 3 huge castles here. If a human could come here, they would definitely be shocked to discover that there were even more magnificent buildings in the core world than the human world. Every castle was like a small city, and they formed a corner in the entire 15th layer of the core world. The exit from the 14th layer to the 15th layer was at the center of the 3 castles. As for where the passageway to the 16th layer was, very few creatures in the core world knew. At this moment, 20 tall and burly fire demons were patrolling at the entrance of the huge tunnel. They did not look exactly the same. To put it simply, they were divided into 2 forms. One of them was burning with golden flames, and their burly bodies were completely shrouded in flames. One could vaguely see that their bodies were extremely sturdy, and they even had 3 long horns on their heads. The other type of fire demon looked almost the same, but the only difference was that their bodies were burning with pitch black and cold flames. That's right, the Flame Tyrant King and the Dark Flame Devil King that once ruled the core world were both from the Fire Demon clan. At that time, the Fire Demon clan could be said to be at its peak, far surpassing the other clans in the core world. Unfortunately, the Flame Tyrant King and the Dark Flame Devil King had divided the entire Fire Demon clan into two, and they fought with each other, inciting other clans to wage war against each other, causing chaos in the core world. During that period of time, at least 30 clans in the core world were annihilated, and it was because of this that the Flaming Bar came into being and unified the core world. After the two kings were killed by the Flaming Bar, the Fire Demon clan instantly declined. In order to continue the clan and not take revenge for the hatred that they had built up over the years, the Flame Demon clan and the Dark Flame Devil clan merged to form the Fire Demon clan, which stabilized the situation. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although the Fire Demon clan had suffered such a heavy blow, they were still one of the three strongest clans in the core world. The exit of the 15th floor was guarded by the three clans in turns every month. Of course, this was a rough calculation based on human time. The clans in the core world naturally had their own calculation method. The Fire Spirit clan was different from the Fire Demon clan. Their biggest characteristic was that they did not have a physical body. They were an ancient clan that had lived in the core world for an unknown period of time. Most of the living creatures in the core world only knew that the Fire Spirit clan had existed before the Fire Demon clan. In the core world, the Fire Spirit clan could be said to be the most beloved clan because they hated war, loved peace, and were extremely powerful. Back then, the reason why the Flaming Bar could kill the two kings and unify the entire core world was inseparable from the Fire Spirit clan's help. All clans respected the Fire Spirit clan greatly. Even the Fire Demon clan that disliked them did not dare to provoke them. After all, the current Fire Demon clan could not be compared to the past. As for the Fire Lotus clan, the last of the three clans, it was personally founded by the Flaming Bar Empress. There was more than one Red Lotus in the core world. The Fire Lotus clan could be said to have come from the 18th floor of the core world. When the Flaming Bar awakened and gained consciousness, she transplanted the entire Fire Lotus clan to the 15th floor of the core world. Although the Fire Lotus clan was born in the 18th floor, the environment there was too harsh. Only the Flaming Bar was able to awaken from it. In the 15th floor of the core world, the Fire Lotus clan displayed a unique advantage. In just a short 1,000 years, hundreds of Fire Lotus clan powerhouses awakened. Without exception, their strength had already reached level 10 after awakening. They were even more powerful than the Dragon clan on the surface world. In addition, the Flaming Bar could be said to be the clan leader of the Fire Lotus clan. As a result, no one dared to obstruct the development of the Fire Lotus clan. After a long time, the Fire Lotus clan had grown into a powerful clan that could rival the Fire Spirit clan and the Fire Demon clan. With the existence of the Flaming Bar, the three clans had always lived in harmony. However, after losing the aura of the Flaming Bar goddess, the three clans in the core world appeared to be united, but at heart, they were divided. Small frictions and disputes began to appear, especially between the Fire Demon clan and the Fire Lotus clan. The prosperity of the Fire Demon clan could be said to have been extinguished by the Flaming Bar. Naturally, they did not have any good feelings towards the Fire Lotus clan. In the past, with the suppression of the Flaming Bar, the Fire Demon clan naturally did not dare to express anything. However, as the news of the Flaming Bar's disappearance was confirmed, the Fire Demon clan was no longer willing to be left out. In particular, in the recent 1,000 years, an astonishing genius had appeared in the Fire Demon clan. Under his command, the strength of the Fire Demon clan rapidly increased, and there was already a faint trend of surpassing the Fire Spirit clan and the Holian clan. In order to allow the core world to continue developing steadily, the Fire Spirit King, the clan leader of the Fire Spirit clan, and one of the three Supreme Elders, decided to hold a celebration of the Holy Church. His goal was very simple, and that was to choose an acting leader to command the entire core world. He had no choice but to do so. The pressure brought by the fire demon clan was increasing, and he was almost unable to suppress it. If he did not think of a solution, once a problem arose, the tragedy of the past might repeat itself. Chapter 531. The fire spirit race itself had its own problems. Unless there was a huge disaster in the core world, the fire spirit race could only remain neutral according to the rules passed down by their ancestors. At most, they might help the fire lotus race a little. But even so, the fire demon race was still insatiable and getting more and more outrageous. After careful consideration, the fire spirit king decided to hold this ceremony in hopes of selecting an acting bishop to command the overall situation. The fire demon race was naturally happy to see such a situation happen, but the fire spirit king put forward a condition. In order to nurture new people, the three supreme elders were not allowed to take part in the selection ceremony of the acting sect master. The patriarch of the fire demon race, the fire demon king, was the one who led the fire demon race to become powerful again. He knew that his strength had already surpassed the fire lotus king and the fire spirit king, so he naturally disagreed with the conditions proposed by the fire spirit king. But in the end, he still compromised. The reason was very simple. The fire spirit king told him that if he didn't agree to continue to be entangled with them, the fire spirit king would join forces with the fire lotus king for the sake of the peace of the core world. The two races would join forces to eliminate the fire demon race. Although the fire demon race was arrogant, they also understood that it was impossible for their race to fight against the other two races at the same time. Feeling helpless, they could only swallow their anger and agree. In a few days, the ceremony for the selection of the acting bishop of the Flaming Bar Holy Church would be held. The three races were making preparations in full swing. In the eyes of the fire demon race and the other races, the acting bishop would definitely appear among the three races. The other races would at most be there to watch the ceremony and join in the fun. The competition between the three races had reached a white-hot level. Naturally, no one was willing to relax at this moment, and the manpower that they had secretly prepared was almost ready. The 20 fire demons who were patrolling suddenly stopped in their tracks and looked at the entrance of the deep 15th floor in unison. Accompanied by a deep dragon roar, dazzling gold and black flames ignited, and a huge figure flew out of the exit. The flames on the bodies of the 20 fire demons blazed at the same time, and the surrounding air instantly became viscous. The temperature that was originally 80 degrees Celsius instantly rose to over 300 degrees Celsius, and the intense mana fluctuations mixed with the powerful mental lock-on shrouded the colossus that appeared out of nowhere. It was a tyrannical creature that the fire demons had never seen before. These fire demons, who had an average cultivation base of rank 9, actually felt an irresistible power from its body. Just as they collectively locked onto it and shrouded it, a layer of faint silver light spread out from the direction of the gigantic creature's head. The fire demon sect was shocked to find that their lock-on had landed in nothingness, as if no creature had appeared at all. "How dare you be so rude to me?" A clear and resounding voice came from above the colossus. In the next moment, the colossus with 9 claws had already landed on the ground with a loud bang, causing the ground around it to tremble violently. At that moment, the fire demons could clearly see that the gigantic creature's body was actually of 2 colors. One side was white, while the other side was black. It also had 2 big heads. They had never seen such a creature before. If it were not for the intense, extreme yang and yin flames on its body, these fire demons would have probably thought that an enemy had invaded. The first 2 creatures that jumped off the back of the gigantic creature made the fire demons heave a sigh of relief. They were 2 behemoths that were 6 meters tall and looked almost identical to them. The patrolling fire demons were only about 4 meters tall, which was much smaller than the 2 fellows that had landed. Upon seeing them, the group of fire demons hurriedly withdrew their auras and knelt on one knee at the same time. They said respectfully, "Greetings, Lord Overlord." Yes, the 2 gigantic creatures were also burning with golden and black flames. Among the fire demons, Those that were over 5 meters tall could be considered fire demon commanders. Those that were over 6 meters tall were overlords, and those that were over 8 meters tall were great overlords. The most powerful fire demon king was a powerful existence that was over 10 meters tall. What made the fire demons bewildered was that the flame overlord and dark flame overlord completely ignored them after they landed. Instead, they moved to the side and knelt on one knee as if they were welcoming something. Then, 10 people jumped off the back of the gigantic creature. The person in the lead was completely covered in red armor, and the sinister aura of the armor was contained within. Not a single bit of mana fluctuation could be felt from his body. Of course, the fire demons weren't stupid enough to think that this was a weak life form. Only the powerhouses of the core world could calmly come to the 15th floor of the core world. Apart from the 3 great clans, the other races had to be at least overlord rank or above to be able to come here temporarily. The 9 people following behind this person were all covered in a layer of crystal red rocks that looked like armor. They clearly looked like fire puppets. Could it be that this person is a puppet king? But why does the armor on this puppet king look so strange? Besides, the overlord of the fire demon race shouldn't be leading the way personally. Living puppets lived on the 2nd floor of the core, and they were ranked 4th or 3rd in the entire core world. They were considered a relatively powerful race. Fire puppets were very close to the fire spirit race because their form of existence was somewhat similar to the fire spirit race. However, the fire spirit race had powerful souls that could directly attach themselves to the fire element through their souls, while the fire puppet race had to attach their souls to some crystals in order to continue living. Their bodies could come in many forms, and the fire puppet race was most used to imitating the appearance of the humans in the outside world. They were a race that was purely proficient in mental strength. The armored person who seemed to be the puppet king waved his right hand, and a crack suddenly appeared in the air. The huge creature that carried them here earlier roared in a low voice and disappeared into the crack with a flash. The fire demons could not help but feel apprehensive when they saw this scene. In the core world, only the patriarchs of the top 10 races could have mounts. If the patriarchs of the other clans, even the core elders, used mounts, it would mean that they were provoking the patriarch of the top 10 races. This was one of the biggest taboos in the core world, and nobody dared to violate it easily. Since this guy who seemed to be the puppet king dared to do this, he must be confident that he was strong enough. In the past celebrations, there had been races that suddenly erupted and displayed powerful strength, causing the ranking of the entire race to rise, and even the entire race to migrate to a better level. Could it be that the puppet race was going to erupt this time? The fire demons let their imaginations run wild, but they dared not neglect their responsibilities. The leader of the fire demons strode forward and stopped 20 meters away from the creature in red armor. He looked at the 2 fire demon overlords beside him with some fear and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, please show us your token." The 15th floor was not only where the 3 powerful races lived, but also where the headquarters of the Holy Church of Flaming Bar was located. If other races wanted to come here, they would have to show the token issued by the Holy Church. Otherwise, they would be treated as invaders, and they would have to bear the wrath of the 3 powerful races no matter who they were. The people who suddenly appeared on the 15th floor were none other than Ji Dong and his companions. It had been a month and a half since they left the territory of the Fire Raven race on the 2nd floor of the core world. During this month and a half, they did not rest at all and saw too many things in the core world. When they encountered the fire puppet race on the 12th floor, they excitedly decided to pretend to be from the fire puppet race and attend the celebration this time after careful consideration. This way, they could conceal their identity as Heavenly STEM holy disciples as much as possible. A total of 11 golden tokens flew out and stopped in front of the fire demon at the same time. This control caused the golden flames on the fire demon's body to jump. It was surprised that from a moment Ji Dong appeared until now, whether it was when he opened up the space to take away his mount or when he tossed the token in front of it, there was not the slightest bit of mana fluctuation from his body. Just how powerful must one be to be able to do this? The fire demon's soul undulations clearly became more respectful. After checking the tokens in front of it one by one, it took a step back respectfully and said, "Respected Lord Puppet King, are there 11 people from the fire puppet race participating in the celebration this time?" Jidong nodded his head indifferently. His soul undulations were transmitted, and he did not answer the question. "Can we go now?" "Of course." The fire demon hurriedly retreated to the side, respectfully, and did not dare to ask anymore. After all, it was not the first time he had seen such a situation. It was common for powerful races to snatch the tokens of the patriarchs of the weaker races in the core world. In the words of the Fire Demon King, the weaker races were not qualified to participate in the celebration. Even if they really came, they would not be able to survive on the 15th floor of the core world. Hence, they might as well let everyone fight for the tokens. The more tokens they obtained, the more powerful the race was. The Fire Spirit King felt very helpless about this. According to the rules of the Saint Flaming Bar, although other races could not easily come to the 15th floor of the core world, the three major races could not leave this place easily either. Therefore, the Fire Spirit King was powerless to do anything. In the most excessive celebration, a race actually brought 43 tokens to participate. Although it was rare for Jidong's group to come with 11 people, it was not a big deal. As for the two that Jidong summoned, they were from the Fire Demon race, at least on the surface. Naturally, they did not need any tokens to enter the 15th floor. Before Jidong came here, he had already inquired about the situation here from the other geocentric races. Unfortunately, he had overlooked something, and that was that the Fire Demon clan could not leave the 15th level easily. Therefore, as soon as they left, the fire demons in charge of patrolling immediately split up and returned to the Fire Demon clan's castle to report. In the distance, the three castles were already in sight. When Jidong was on the 10th floor of the core world, he heard that there was a fiery lotus race in the core world, which really made him see the hope of resurrection in the Flaming Bar. The Heavenly Stem holy disciples were naturally happy for Jidong. Only Chun Sichuan sighed helplessly in her heart. "Silly Jidong, in fact, I'm right by your side. Why do you need resurrection?" Due to the existence of the fiery lotus race, Jidong immediately decided to go to the fiery lotus race's castle as soon as he arrived. However, he was in a dilemma now. Which is the fiery lotus race's castle? There were 3 more days before the ceremony for the selection of the acting leader of the Flaming Bar Holy Church would be held in the Fire Demon race's castle. Before that, Jidong decided to go to the Fiery Lotus Race's castle to take a look. Through their understanding and investigation of the core world, the Heavenly Stem holy disciples discovered that the lifestyles of the creatures in the core world after the 5th floor were somewhat similar to what humans had imagined. They also had their own society. However, the difference in levels was extremely obvious. Many places had specialized trading centers. Without a doubt, the 15th floor of the core world was the highest trading center in the entire core world. In fact, one of the reasons why the Heavenly Stem holy disciples came to the core world was to fulfill the conditions set by the foolishly rich Chamber of Commerce. If they could directly buy the gems on the 18th floor here, they would not have to take the risk, and it would naturally be easier for them to leave this place. After a brief discussion with his companions, Jidong decided to bring everyone to a random castle, and then inquire about the location of the Fiery Lotus Race's castle. After all, the 15th floor of the core world was not that big. The rich fire element made Jidong feel so comfortable that he almost moaned. Ever since he entered the core world, he had been working hard to control his saint-leveled soul. Even so, his mana, which had reached 8 crowns, had actually evolved to level 84 in just 3 months. It could be seen how beneficial the core world was to fire element magic masters. However, as they ventured deeper into the core world, Jidong realized that the core world was indeed not something that humans could contend against. In the human world, level 10 divine beasts were extremely rare, and it was the same for powerhouses with 9 crowns. However, in the core world, just the entire Fiery Lotus race was a powerhouse above level 10. If the core world launched an attack on the surface world, Perhaps even the combined forces of the Radiance continent and the Darkness continent might not be able to stop it. Therefore, the core world could not fall into chaos. If it was ruled by some ambitious person who knew if they would launch an attack on the surface world in the future. Chapter 532. In order to hide their identities, they no longer used the 5 elements yin-yang realm, but everyone maintained their peak state of magic power. Although the layer of fire quartz on the surface of their bodies allowed them to endure the heat, it also isolated them from the heat of the outside world as much as possible. The holy flame armor on their bodies played an important role, and the deeper they went into the core world, the greater the benefits of the holy flame armor. Not only could it adjust their body temperature, it could also prevent the fire demons from invading their bodies, and it could help them maintain the magic power in their bodies as much as possible. Moreover, after being here for 3 months, they had gradually adapted to the environment. After all, they were gradually going deeper and not immediately arriving at a place with an extremely high temperature, so they could still endure it, but it was not too comfortable. The dense fire element was also a form of training for the heavenly stem saints. It trained them on how to survive in a place with thin or even no elements of their own. It also trained their ability to resist the invasion of other elements. Although their improvement speed could not be compared to Jidong's, everyone's magic power had increased except for Ah Jin, especially the weaker Du Exen, Du Ming, and Lan Bauer. They were getting closer and closer to level 80. Jidong did not summon the sacred evolution fire dragon to fly again. Without permission, flying on the 15th floor was also a taboo. They could only walk toward the castle. "It's so hot here," Du Exener said in a low voice. Among the 5 elements, fire restrained metal, water restrained fire, and wood fed fire. Therefore, the demon masters of the wood, water, and metal races did not feel good here. Only Miao Miao, Lang Tianyi, and the lightning attribute Fury were slightly more comfortable. Of course, this was only relative. Jidong glanced at Du Exiner and said, "Exiner, if you feel uncomfortable, tell me." The temperature on the 15th floor has increased again. Moreover, there are no longer any elements of your respective attributes here. Unless it's absolutely necessary, no one should act rashly. Not only are there many experts here, but there's also no place for everyone to recover. Do you remember what I said when we entered the 3rd floor? If it really comes to that, no one is allowed to hesitate. After 3 months of traveling to the core of the earth, among the 5 elements, Jidong had become more dignified than before, and his companions were more convinced of him. In the past 3 months of joint training, the disciples of the heavenly stems had truly found a tacit understanding with each other. Although they were unwilling, no one disobeyed Jidong's wishes. Including Fury, everyone nodded. The heavenly stem saints walked very quickly. In the distance, the castles they had chosen were becoming clearer and clearer. The 3 castles looked similar and were all built on mountains. Jidong looked into the distance and immediately discovered that the people guarding the gates of this castle were not members of the fire demon race. It was obvious that there was a 50% chance that he had chosen to go directly to the Fire Lotus race. Everyone quickened their pace and finally arrived in front of the castle. When they saw the appearance of the castle, they could not help but feel a little amused. They did not know if it was to imitate a city in the human world, but there was actually a wide river in front of the castle. Of course, what flowed inside was not river water, but magma. Apart from being amused, they were also shocked. This was because the castle in front of them was simply too dazzling. Other than Qin Sichuan, no one else had seen such a stunning building. Previously, when they were far away, they could only see a sea of crystal red. In addition, the extremely high temperature caused the air to distort, causing them to be unable to see very far. In such a high-temperature world, even the range and precision of the detection of soul power would be affected. Other than Jidong, it was difficult for the rest to detect beyond 100 meters with their soul power. Now that they were in front of them, they saw a completely different scene. A huge castle was built on a mountain, and the magma river in front of the castle was about 30 meters wide. The temperature here was far above 80 degrees Celsius, and the steaming air was constantly rippling. The huge suspension bridge was completely carved out of stone and was built on both sides, allowing creatures from the core to pass through. After the suspension bridge, the main gate of the castle was 30 meters tall, and the huge city walls were incomparably majestic. The most shocking thing was that the huge castle that appeared in front of them was completely built with red crystal rock. Just think about it. How could a castle that seemed to be carved out of rubies not dazzle people? The 15th floor of the core world was a fiery red world to begin with, and the color of the castle was especially translucent. The scorching temperature and the dazzling castle gave people the feeling that they had arrived in a hellish world. The breathing of the heavenly stem, holy apostles, uncontrollably quickened. This was the core of the core world. They should be proud to be able to come here. Jidong was even sure that there were very few humans who could come here before them. Come, let's go in. Jidong calmed the excitement in his heart, not because of the majesty of the castle, but because he remembered that this place was originally ruled by the Flaming Bar. Jidong always had a special feeling for the core world, and it was all because of the Flaming Bar. After walking on the suspension bridge, Destruction immediately felt the mana of his companions start to be consumed. There was a magma river below, and the temperature here was already over 300 degrees Celsius. If they didn't use mana to resist, the heavenly stem holy apostles wouldn't be able to bear it. When they arrived at the entrance of the castle, everyone was stunned. There were only 2 people standing there guarding the gate. Their appearance was no different from that of a human. They were tall and slender, wore dark red dresses, and had fiery red hair. They were actually 2 peerless beauties. They just stood there quietly without any expression on their faces, but it was enough to give everyone an invisible sense of deterrence. Be it Jidong or the heavenly stem holy apostles, they were all shocked when they saw the 2 women, especially those who had experienced the calamity of the holy evil island. Even though the appearance of the 2 women was different from that of the Flaming Bar, their clothes, hair color, and even their tall figures and the rich fire element around them were simply replicas of the Flaming Bar. Jidong stopped in his tracks, and his body started to tremble uncontrollably. He didn't expect his luck to be so good, and his random choice actually led him to the Flaming Lotus Castle. Flaming Bar, these are your clansmen. Jidong couldn't help but miss them crazily. Although the 2 women in front of him were not as beautiful as the Flaming Bar, they reminded Jidong of the Flaming Bar that he had encountered for the first time in the core world. He almost lost control of his usually calm emotions. A small, ice-cold hand gently grasped Jidong's tightly clenched fist, and a fresh and lively aura quietly flowed into Jidong's palm, causing his agitated heart to tremble slightly before slowly calming down. When he turned his head to look, Chun Sichuan was already by his side. Her little hand came out of the protective crystal rock and held his hand. She even channeled her ultimate Ewood mana into his body. One must know that doing so would undoubtedly consume a large amount of mana that could not be recovered in her body, but she still did it. Jidong looked at Chun Sichuan, then looked at the Flaming Bar woman not far away from him. His eyes, which were hidden under the hideous mask, could not help but reveal a complicated light. Xixian, why do you treat me so well? If I had met you first, I'm afraid that my feelings for you would not be any less than the feelings I had for the Flaming Bar. God has been so kind to me, allowing me to meet the Flaming Bar and you first. However, God has been so unfair to you, allowing you to fall in love with me. He used his soul to send a signal to Chun Sichuan that he was fine. Chun Sichuan did not dwell on it, and quietly withdrew her hand. Her expression was natural, and her soul did not fluctuate. It was as if she had done the most insignificant thing. However, the more it was like this, the more it touched Jidong's heart. Jidong took in a deep breath and walked over first. Without a doubt, the 2 people guarding the city gate were members of the Fire Lotus tribe. They did not stop Jidong as he walked over. They only looked at Jidong's armor curiously. Since they could pass through the exit of the 15th floor, it proved that the people before them were legal. Naturally, they did not need to stop them. Jidong could clearly sense that the 2 members of the Fire Lotus tribe were clearly experts that could rival class 10 magical beasts or 9 crowned demon masters. In the human world, If someone told them that there were two sovereigns guarding the city gate, who would believe it? However, such a situation had occurred in the Fire Lotus Castle in the core world. According to the information Jidong had obtained, the Fire Lotus tribe had the fewest clansmen among the three great clans in the core world. However, they were the most powerful in terms of average battle prowess. For example, ordinary clansmen of the Fire Demon tribe and the Fire Spirit tribe were only around class 9. They were roughly class 8 when they were born. Only the Fire Lotus tribe had a cultivation of class 10 the moment they were born. If it were not for the fact that the Fire Lotus tribe reproduced and awakened too slowly, the entire core world would have been ruled by them long ago. Of course, when Flaming Bar was still alive, the Fire Lotus tribe could be said to be the royalty of the core world. The Heavenly Stem holy disciples walked into the Fire Lotus Castle one after another. They were surprised to see the streets, which were similar to the streets in human cities. Both sides of the streets were lined with shops. However, the things being traded here were completely different from those in the human world. After entering the castle, the temperature dropped a little. However, it was different from when they had just entered the 15th floor. The temperature in the castle was as high as 100 degrees Celsius. It was as hot as the boiling point of water. It was obvious that this was caused by the fire crystals that were used to build the castle. Jidong's heart trembled. He immediately thought of the origins of these shops. It was obvious that Flaming Bar had brought this idea back to the human world before he knew him. Perhaps only the Fire Lotus tribe had such a street among the three great castles. In reality, Jidong's guess was completely correct. The Fire Lotus Castle was not only the territory of the Fire Lotus tribe, but it was also the highest trading place in the entire core world. All sorts of treasures of the core world were traded here. After passing by 3 shops, Jidong saw a familiar crystal placed in front of shop. It was the kind of crystal that was used to make the core elder's token. The crystal was placed on a red crystal-colored stone platform. It exuded a strong aura of the fire element. Everyone, wait for me. Jidong strode into the shop. The other Heavenly Stem holy disciples and the 2 elemental bodies were waiting outside. Jidong walked into the shop. The shop was very big, but there were not many things placed inside. Jidong saw all sorts of red crystals at first glance. They were almost all the kinds that he wanted. However, based on the color and the aura of the fire element, there was a difference in quality. The darker the color of the crystal, the better the quality. What do you want to buy? A cold and pleasant voice was heard. When he heard this voice, Jidong immediately thought that he was hallucinating. He turned around abruptly and saw a lady walking in from the side door. When he saw this lady, Jidong felt as if his breathing had stopped. This was because the lady's appearance was 70% similar to that of the Flaming Bar. There were only a few minor differences. Furthermore, her aura was much colder than that of the Flaming Bar. She's not the Flaming Bar. She's not the Flaming Bar. Jidong desperately shouted to himself. He was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and rushed forward to hug her. The lady in red could not help but frown when she saw Jidong's blank expression. She said, "Which clan are you from? If you continue to stare at me, I'll kill you." She really wasn't the Flaming Bar. A strong sense of disappointment welled up in Jidong's heart. When the lady in red had frowned, her expression had been different from that of the Flaming Bar. Although she was also extremely alluring, she lacked the gentle charm that the Flaming Bar had when she had looked at him. She also did not have the reserved dignity of the Flaming Bar. When the lady in red saw that Jidong was still standing there in a daze after hearing her words and was staring at her unblinkingly, a murderous aura rose from between her brows. She moved gracefully and appeared in front of Jidong in the blink of an eye. Her palm was gently aimed at Jidong's chest. Jidong's blank gaze suddenly regained its vigor. He did not dodge when he saw that the lady in red's palm, which was as tender as a spring onion, was about to strike his chest. There was no sound at all as the lady's right palm imprinted itself on Jidong's chest. In the next moment, Jidong's entire body was sent flying like a cannonball. With a loud bang, he slammed fiercely into the sturdy wall behind him. The wall was far sturdier than any material that Jidong knew of. His entire body had sunk half a foot into the wall, but it did not show any signs of breaking.